So is there anybody there?
All right. Can you hear me?
So far, so good. I
All
like
right.
a lot more than before. It wouldn't even let me in.
All right.
Yeah.
Can anyone hear us? Please let me know in the chat. Holy hell, this was a royal pain in the ass.
Is Pete still around?
Okay. Okay. Guardia says they can hear us. All right. That is awesome. Okay. So everyone, please forgive me for all of that drama. This is such a complicated process. We're actually, anyway, I've got to figure out my technology. But we have a really great, the Revolting Woman's in the chat. That's awesome. We have a really great discussion tonight. We are very, 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 very fortunate to have with us Lance. I don't want to just throw all of his details out there. Lance is a man Pete and I both met this last August. We'd actually known him for a while through an online forum, but we hadn't met him in person. We were both blown away. This is a man of substance, and an interesting man on top of that, which is a rare thing.
It says I was muted, so I'm not hearing anything.
I'm muted. Somehow I got muted too. I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Now I can hear you. That's much, much better.
Okay. God, we're not going to have an easy night of it. Okay, let me start all that over. Somehow both Lance and I got muted. Good evening, everyone. I apologize for all of the technical difficulties. We have a great conversation tonight. I am extremely excited about it. Someone tell me if the sound's back, please. Just give me a quick heads up in the chat. All right, I think that means we're good. Please, I'm so sorry about this, Ben. Okay, where was I? We have a great conversation tonight. We're talking with Lance. Lance, how do you want to? You just want to be Lance, or do you want to be a blessed man, or how do you want me to refer to you tonight?
Fine.
Lance is fine. Okay. So Pete and I, and we want to thank Pete Rambo. Check out his channel. Pete is facilitating this conversation tonight technologically because I'm a moron and I couldn't make it work. So thank you, Pete, for the rescue. So we met Lance this summer. Both of us were kind of blown away. We had known him before, prior to this, on some other on a different forum, but we'd never met him in meat space before. We'd never met him. Yeah, don't grab. Trust me, Anonymous America. I will not be grabbing the damn guns. My poor wife is in the live stream. She's probably seeing my shirts all over the place. Okay. So here's what Lance is a scholar, and here's what Lance wanted to talk about. Lance wanted me to watch this show. This show is called Arifureta, and it is an anime. And some of you may be rolling your eyes, but you shouldn't be. Anime is it's at its best, it can be an extremely good art form. And in this particular instance, it gets close to being its best. This anime, Lance, do you want to say anything about yourself or your background or anything?
You've already over-introduced me.
I've already over-introduced you. Okay. So Lance and I were talking about these issues around masculinity, and he wanted me to watch this show Arifureta, and I started watching it, and it kind of blew me away. It built up really, 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 really slow. And when I say it built up slow, it doesn't mean it was slow and boring, but it didn't just hit you with the point all at once. It just didn't walk up and club you with the ideas. And it just sort of built up to it. And like the last 3 episodes, I went, whoa. I never expected it out of this is probably unfair, but out of a Japanese show. It just was a, what is the history on that? Do you know the writer or anything, Lance?
I don't know anything about the writer or anything about the manga that might have underwrote it, but
I should have looked that up, but I didn't think about it. Do you want to give a recap of the story, or do you want me to do
it? You go ahead.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's not do a recap of the story. Let's introduce this character, because where the character starts is he starts as the nice guy, the sort of the incompetent, admirable, nice guy loser. His name, I can never keep up with all the names. They call him Hajime, and they call him Nakamuno or Nakamune or something. I think of him as Hajime. How do you talk about him?
I call him Hajime, and that would be probably what he's called by his friends.
Okay. So this character Hajime, and if you go watch this anime, and I encourage you to go watch it, but I'm by no means an anime expert, but I'm at least familiar with it, and I'm familiar with some of the tropes and some of the forms, and this one does not give you the backstory. It throws you right into this character's where he's at, what he's doing, and you've got to kind of catch up over the course of the episodes. It is actually a really well done, entertaining show on its own merits. But we meet Hajime, and he's this little mousy guy on a quest. He's on an adventure, not one he chose. It chose him, and it's very dangerous. And he is the prototypical anime nice guy. He's concerned. He wants to protect the girls, but he's weak, and he's and he's in way over his head. I mean, he is in way over his head, and no one respects him, including there's this young woman, this girl on this adventure who loves him. She has like romantic feelings for him, but she does not respect him. And I think, and maybe I'm reading too far into this, but I thought, like, how would you describe it? Like she had like little brother type feelings for him? Was he friend zoned? What was going on there with the?
I think part of it is that, like, the subtitle for the show is from underpowered to world's strongest, is kind of, that's the subscript that goes with it. And Hajime starts out, he doesn't have like any of the typical battle gifts that any of his peers have. Like, he's not a warrior or a soldier. He's able to create things. He's an artificer. He has an ability that allows him to basically form things out of materials.
But he's not very good at it.
Yeah, and so he's doing his best. He has a good heart, but Kaori, the original love interest in him, is kind of a mothering figure, and she promises him in some of the first episodes when they're going down in the dungeon, and he considers himself kind of a support character. She promises that she's going to keep him safe because she's a healer. She's able to, heal people, and she was going to keep him safe when they go down into the dungeons. And that quest is kind of interesting, especially, I don't know how many spoilers you want to give away as to their being called there by the god in order to, fight against the demons and that stuff.
Yeah, I don't think most of the the plot points are that important to the. I mean, honestly, you know, they kind of reveal them as an aside as the story goes on. It really is, you know, the story about this hero's journey, or who will become the hero. But all right, so we've got the prototypical. Am I saying that right? We've got the stereotypical nice guy loser, who is usually lionized. You know, they turn that. You know, think like almost any character ever played by Paul Rudd. You know, kind of, yeah, I'm nice and I'm quirky, and somehow it'll all work out because, you know, the competent, powerful women will make sure I don't get in too much trouble. Kind of the, you know, the hero story of the last 30 or 40 years, you know. And this Hajime guy, you see it in the way everyone treats him. You know, they treat him like he's a fool, and he is kind of a fool. But then he goes on. He's on this quest, but in the middle of this quest, he goes on another quest. He gets sidetracked, and yeah, no gun. Everyone's reminding me not to touch the guns. If I touch the guns, the live stream will get canceled. And that's what we want to talk about. We want to talk about this journey from nice guy loser to hard man hero, because it's not that typical story where nice guy loser saves the day and is the hero. Nice guy loser has to go on a blood curdling journey through monstrosity. He has to. You want to talk about this before I run away with it?
I can start from, because I did kind of look at the early episodes again. It's been a while since but anyway, the event that happens early on is they are kind of magically transported deep down in this labyrinth, which becomes significant later on because there's kind of a mystery that surrounds these labyrinths and the mavericks that created them. But in that process, they encounter a trap and they're taken much deeper than they've ever been before. And these are all people who have been transported from the real world, from Japan, to this mystical world. And Hajime, Nakuma, is betrayed by one of his classmates, and he is thrown to the bottom of the abyss. And in the abyss, he somehow miraculously survives.
I wouldn't say somehow miraculously survives. I would say how he survives is the hero's journey. You know, this is how he survives as he embraces his inner monster, like you were talking about the Jordan Peterson stuff.
Yeah.
I don't want to gloss over this. You know, it's not somehow miraculously. He finds himself with no other option but to literally embrace the inner monster, become the monster, and that's how he survives.
Yeah. So anyway, falling to the bottom of the abyss, he finds something that's a relic that keeps him alive, and then a bear eats off one of his arms, which is pretty grisly, right at the front.
Yeah, there's a fair amount of gore in this.
He manages to escape, but he is right off the bat handicapped and manages to survive by saying that he is going to do anything and kill anything that stands in his way in order to survive. And
he has to eat the monsters he's slaying. That's the only way he stays alive, is by eating these monsters.
And then by eating the monster flesh, it makes him violently ill, and it would poison him, but for the relic he found. And then he takes on the qualities of the monsters that he slays early on. So he gains strength. And in one of the early episodes, he finds the bear back, and then basically through a gun he has created, and I guess I should warn you not to touch the guns, even though I don't understand the inside joke. Through a gun he's created, not only cuts off the bear's arm and eats it, but then kills the bear. And that's kind of one of the early marks. And he becomes less and less the good guy in the early stages.
Yeah, I would like to dig into this part because to me, this was kind of where the show did a lot of the heavy lifting on this hero's journey, because he comes out of this section of the story pretty much completely having made the transformation from the nice guy into the monster, but the transformation from the monster into the hard man hero is just a tiny little click to the right. The vast majority of the journey from nice guy to hard man hero is in this place where he becomes the monster. Where he's stuck in this hellhole that he can't escape. And this did speak to some of my life experiences, and probably some of yours too. And he has to do this horrid shit. He's just got he's constantly on the verge of death. He's constantly about to get destroyed by these monsters. He's constantly just barely surviving, and the only way he lives is he's got to eat the flesh of these horrific, these putrid zombie type demon creatures. And like I said, it's killing. It would kill him, except for he found some, like, it was water, right? The relic he found that was keeping him alive.
Basically just holy water type thing.
And I'm not sure why the holy water was down there, but it's not that important. It's part of the story. I would like to dig into this part. How does this apply? What do we pull out of this on our? Because many of us struggle. I struggle with this nice guy thing. I want to be liked. I love people. I love their opinion. I want to get along with everybody. And this nice guy thing is something that a trap I want to fall into. I want people to like me. I see it a lot with my daughters. I've got to be really careful with, because I want my daughters to love me. And I catch myself going into this nice guy thing, or wanting to. I don't do it, thank God. I've been to the bottom of the labyrinth and lost my arm, and he lost his right arm and his left eye, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what is that? If we're looking for the metaphor there, what is it in a man's life that is that point where he can choose to fight and eat the monsters and ingest the monsters and take on the qualities of the monsters? What is that in a man's life when he's faced with that? Or am I just being melodramatic?
No, I don't think you're melodramatic. I think, especially if you look at narratives, like whether we're talking about characters in biblical narrative or people in literature or even us, like we've talked about like the Joseph story before, and how in the Joseph story in Genesis, he's told early on, look, you're going to be the guy who's in charge. Everybody's going to bow down to you. And then for the next 6 chapters, Joseph goes from being told he's going to be in charge to suddenly being almost killed by his brothers, sold into slavery, and then from slavery to prison. And if of the things that he thinks his life is going to be about, being in charge is definitely not one of them. For you, it maybe your family is the most important, or maybe strength is most important, or maybe material resources or something else is supposed to be the most important, and that's the thing you value, and probably that's the thing that's going to get the sucker punch, and you're going to get thrown backwards. So I don't think you're out of line to think about, well, what does this story tell us about us? And I think particularly as men, I would say I'm very agreeable, like you, that I am a people pleaser. I think a lot of us are. Peterson talks about how we're kind of conditioned not to be competitive, not to be aggressive, not to be assertive, but to be agreeable. So I don't think you're off base thinking about how this may.
Right. So you hit on something there, and let me see if I can tease it out a little bit. So you talked about, yeah, we've been conditioned to be agreeable. I had a boss one time he was trying to teach me sales. I'm terrible at sales. I'm too honest. Uh, but he said he pulled that keys out of his pocket and he handed them to the guy next to me, and he said, "Here, take these." And the guy reached out and took the keys. And the boss looked at him and said, "Why'd you do that?" He said, "Well, you told me to." He said, "Well, yeah." And he wanted us to tell people to buy it. Why is not important, but his point was that, yeah, people are sheep, even men, and we'll do what we're told for some stupid reason. We've got this agreeableness. So is the only way to get rid of the agreeableness is to throw ourselves into on purpose, throw ourselves into the bottom of the labyrinth and ingest the monsters? Is that the only way to kickstart this hero's journey from nice guy to hard man hero?
Don't you think? Don't you think God just does that?
I don't. Not for everybody. Um, I mean, I know people who haven't, from the outside looking in, haven't seemed to have the struggles and haven't seemed to have had, they haven't been to the bottom of the labyrinth. Now, maybe that's just from the outside looking in. Who knows what was going on behind closed doors. But yeah, I feel like I know quite a few people who have just never been through the fire, And what's he say? He said, who the Father loves, he chastises. So it's almost like, okay, so in this instance, when we're talking, and Hajime does this, Hajime just doesn't get thrown down the bottom of the labyrinth. He actually runs forward and tries to protect some of his party, some of his comrades in this mission he's on, this quest, and in the process of trying to protect these people, he actually gets thrown down as a consequence, a little bit of his own actions, and then someone actually shot him in the back too for some reason, which never really factors into the rest of the story. So I don't know why that was important.
Season. You find out in the second season.
Oh, okay. I've only seen the first season, but Hajime actually puts himself forward. He could have stayed back and not ended up out front where he was to get kicked to the bottom of the labyrinth and then have to do all this with the monsters. So yeah, it does almost seem like you have to choose on some level to engage the monsters and go through these trials. So yeah, no, it seems like not everyone would have to then.
Jordan Peterson, we talked about before. He talks about that in order to be a hero, you have to be a monster. That um, the world conditions us to be agreeable, and that doesn't make us heroes. It makes us harmless, like a rabbit. And he says a rabbit's no hero. A rabbit just is going to not get eaten. That's like the goal. Um, but for us to really step into heroism, we have to be able to negotiate, which means we have to be able to say no. And if we are unable to say no, we're not going to be able to help ourselves, much less our families, much less anybody else. Um, and I think there's a definite point to that to say, you know, I need to be able to stand up and I need to be able to be hard. And I think maybe part of that is a consequence of modern Western life. Um, if you have to kill what you have to eat, if you're going to eat meat, then you're going to kill, or you're going to pay somebody to do it. And so, I mean, we are empathetic creatures. Our right hemisphere is wired to put us into relationship with the world around us. Everything from plants and flowers and trees to animals, we get attached to things. and then killing something that you've raised, um, that's kind of our left hemisphere that we have to distantiate. We have to say, no, this has to be done. I don't like it, but it's something I have to do. I think if more of us had to kill our own meat, especially something that we'd raised, something that kids named, um, I think it would put things, because I mean, we're talking about Hajime killing and eating these monsters. In some ways, that would be easier than killing our pet goat Spot or the chicken Louise. I don't know. What do you think?
I think you should never be allowed to name animals. Uh, Spot and Louise are terrible names for animals. Uh, so it probably has a little something to do with my own personal story here, where I feel like I got kicked to the bottom of the labyrinth at one point, partly because uh, I was a lot like Hajime. I was ineffectual. I was well-meaning. I was trying to do right, but I was not doing right. And I ended up at the bottom of the labyrinth. And I'm still not entirely sure how I got out. I was at at the peak of Hajime's transformation. He keeps getting stronger. He keeps eating these damn monsters, and it's affecting him, and it changes his appearance, and all of the nice, soft, sweet little boy, because he was a nice kid when you meet him at first. I mean, there was nothing wrong with it. It's not like he was a coward. He wasn't a coward. He wasn't like selfish or angry or mean. He was a very nice, sweet, admirable, well-intentioned, brave, but just completely helpless and hapless, nice guy loser. And as all that starts falling away from him at the bottom of the labyrinth, he finally finds the way out. He gets to the end of the labyrinth, and there's this girl there trapped in a block. And I was kind of talking to Mariah about some of this today, and that's kind of how it was for me. I identified with this. I fell down to the bottom of that labyrinth out of my own haplessness, and it starts refining me and cutting off pieces of me, and it really did cut off pieces of me. And right at the peak of my transformation, right when I no longer when I recognized myself the least, and kind of when I was at my most feral. In fact, I was at my most feral. I had just told God that I was going to go on a spree where I was going to punish every woman in the world I could with my penis. I was so mad. I was savage. Uh, and for some reason at that point, God was like, "Ah, good. We're at the end of the labyrinth." And I met the beautiful woman in the glowy thing, and I kind of rescued her, and she kind of rescued me, and we got out of the labyrinth. It was a very kind of a I don't want to say neat or fun moment for me, when I didn't pick up on that until the end. At the end of the whole series, when I watched all 13 episodes, and I was thinking back on it, and I went, "Oh, holy shit! I've been here. This was me. I was at the bottom of that labyrinth. I was having to do whatever it took to survive, to the point of being homeless at one point through my own stupidity. But at one point, I was completely dependent on the kindness of family, just to stay alive. And when I came out of that, and when the last little bit of that got sliced off me, and I finally was like, "Screw this! I'm done being the nice guy. I've just got to survive." Boom! I broke out of the labyrinth. I met Yue. That's the girl's name he meets first, is Yue. I met Yue, and suddenly, boom! I'm back up to the surface, and I'm on a mission that suddenly I'm equipped for. And I thought that was I mean, it was damn near prophetic looking back on it. It's not the sort of insight you expect to get out of a popular entertainment,
Yeah. Uh, the thing that struck me was Hajime wasn't going to rescue the damsel in distress.
He was not.
And he was going to walk out.
Yeah.
Um, and you remember why he didn't?
I do not.
He saw that it would be to his benefit to have her with him. It was a selfish decision. And really, in the first, like, he is very much losing track of the compassionate parts of himself. And through the second season, he continues to be very self-motivated. He's going to get home. That's his only goal. And as it's a harem anime, girls are added. But every one he is absolutely against adding until he sees that there's some benefit. But in that whole process, they serve to humanize him more and more, so that Yue actually is able to speak to him and basically take the hard edge off of who he's become.
So you just peeled back another layer for me, and I'm a little deeper in the onion. So you talked about him being selfish, and I guess that's the monster part, right? Monsters are selfish. All they want to do is destroy and satisfy their own appetites for destruction. And Hajime gets down almost to that level. The only thing he cares about is what he wants. But then when he becomes the hard man hero, is it because he's selfish enough to put his mission first? That's what makes him the hero from the monster. He has a mission. It's his mission. He's not deviating from his mission to accomplish your mission. And that's an inherently selfish act. But because of the leadership he provides, and because of the animus he provides, it ends up being in everyone's best interest. It actually ends up being the hey Keith, it actually ends up being the kindest thing he can do, is providing that focus and that edge and that vision, because he's providing the vision to these people who did not have a vision. They were all just continually in some kind of stasis. Yue was trapped in this ethereal block. All of his friends are trapped in this never-ending round of battles that are for no reason, that they don't understand, and they're just wearing them down, and they're all going to die. And Hajime goes to the bottom of the labyrinth and comes out with a self-centered worldview that he then brings other people along with, and he turns his self-centered desire into a community building goal. It becomes a vision, and suddenly now it's a quest. Now it's a quest. Now his selfish desire is actually becomes a communal quest, like the Fellowship of the Ring,
Mm-hmm.
And he had to let go of the nice guy stuff in order to be monster enough to say, no, what I want matters. What I want this is important. This is a big enough deal for me to sacrifice you for, because he was willing to sacrifice all these people for this goal of his. It's your turn.
Selfishness is kind of, I don't know if there's a better word for it.
There's probably a better word for it, but think about this. What does Christ tell the church? We're not allowed to deny him. We're to face persecution and torture and death before we can even so much as just deny him. On a certain level, that's you're right. Maybe selfish isn't the right word, but like, if someone had a gun to Mariah's head and was going to shoot her if she didn't, say she wasn't married to me, she has a standing order to deny being married to me, But Christ has the exact opposite policy. He's like, no, you take the bullet. You don't deny me. Maybe selfish isn't the right word, but what is the right word? That's a very, very hard stance.
Yeah. I think, again, I've been listening to Jordan Peterson off and on, and I'm not entirely sure what I think of him, but some of his ideas are challenging. And I think one of the things that he's said that I have thought for some time is that most people have no idea what they want, especially men, and especially young men. I mean, frequently, if you ask somebody what they want, they'll either brush it off with saying, $1 million, a new car, something, something like that. And then if you ask why, they'll say, well, they'll stutter because they won't know why. Well, because it'd be nice to have a million. I can have what I want. Well, so why didn't you say what you want? If you wanted the thing that you wanted $1 million for, then why didn't you just say the thing you wanted? And frequently it comes down to security, or it comes down to that they think there's something that will give them what they want, even though they're not sure what it is they want. So how can we be selfish if we don't know what we want and we aren't even that good at being ourselves? Because I think that's one thing Hajime really, he becomes a self. He becomes himself. Not to please anyone else, not to, interpose himself, not to be thought of as a hero or actually be a hero. But he has this goal to live at all costs, and that becomes the core of who he is. So, what are your thoughts?
Okay, Awakening Soldier just said God would never say take the bullet for him. I believe you're mistaken there, Awakening Soldier. And I think if you stop and think about some of the things we see in the New Testament, you'll realize he expects you to take the bullet. But that's an aside. So you're kind of throwing mind bombs at me right now, and I got little grenades going off all over the place. And so we're talking about how could someone be selfish if they don't even have a realization of self, right? That's what it sounds like you're saying.
Yeah.
And so most men today, at least in the West, have no idea of self. So how could they end up being selfish? And I think that's a very brilliant observation. And I'm trying to tie it back into our topic right now. So where does Hajime find self? I seem to remember there was some point where he decides he's just living to get home, that no matter what, he's gonna live so he can get out of the labyrinth and get back home, right? Is that where he finds self?
I would say, yeah. I mean, there's I don't remember where the quote is, but it's um, purity is single-minded intention, or purity is to will one thing. And I mean, we as Christians, um, we will to be a friend to Jesus Christ. We will to follow him in the way. That is to be our single intention. That is where all of our will is to be exerted. A single-minded focus. Most of us aren't that pure-minded or singular in focus. Um, C.S. Lewis wrote a book, Till We Have Faces, and
I was just talking about this with Mariah yesterday. That's funny.
Really?
Yeah.
And you knew where the title of the book came from?
I forgot. I'm sorry.
No, the title of the book came from God will not meet man face to face until we have faces.
Right.
How can he meet us face to face when we aren't even who we are?
Yeah.
Most of us are afraid to be.
So are we skirting around saying that a man who has a singleness of purpose can't be selfish? That his single-minded purpose is, even though it's very focused on self, it's not actually selfish because it ends up being what's best for everyone around him.
It's something I'm struggling with. I can't say I've got it sorted.
I'm willing to make that statement. I'm willing. I hadn't thought about it before, but if the man represents God in the man woman relationship, or in the family dynamic, and God's will is law. When God speaks, those words are law. What his nature just happens. It's just reality. And so if we say that one of the man's main focuses or jobs is to represent God's nature and character to his family, his woman and his children, or his women and his children, then that should transfer. That man's will, that man's purpose and focus should then become reality and law for that family. And it wouldn't be selfish to pursue his own ends. It would be fulfilling his nature.
Well, and especially if our will as a Christian husband is for our families to follow Christ. I mean, we've talked about the fact that sometimes I think of sled dogs as being kind of a metaphor that we either pull in the right direction or we pull apart. And we all need to be pulling in the right direction, and that being the direction that the master chooses. So that if we aren't pulling in that direction, well, we're not really a team anymore, and it's going to be chaos.
Okay, but are we all sled dogs, or are we all sled dogs tied to the single sled of the church or whatever, or are we all individual? Are we more atomistic? Are we each individual atoms, doing what that atom does, and we just happen to be doing it all in proximity to other atoms?
Well,
Is that distinction making the difference?
I would say that even in, and I would have to say, for me, a dog team probably isn't the best metaphor since I haven't had the most experience. But anytime you've got animals, you still got to lead. So whether it's horses or a herd of cows or bellwether with sheep, there's one that's a leader, and that's
Right,
the
but
one that
is the herd representative of the church, or is the herd representative of the family unit? I guess is what I'm asking.
I was saying that the master was the Lord, and then the lead dog would be the man, and the rest of the pack should follow. And if not,
But the
then it's
sled team is the family unit of that man.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I can go along with that. I start backing off a little bit when we get a much more, holistic, we're all individual sled dogs, all tied to the same sled, and we've all got to pull together. All of Christendom is one giant mass of individual sled dogs that are all tied to one single sled, and I would back away from that a little bit. Hey, Aiden Ears here. Okay, so I've when I had my moment, my when I woke up to self, like Hajime does, it was the way I phrased it to myself was, you know what, Zach, just be the asshole. I was always trying to push down the asshole, and then he would blow up, and it would be, Hulk smash, and it would all explode on me. And when I realized, you know what, no, just be the asshole up front, and it never builds, and there's never an explosion, and you end up being nicer and kinder in the long run. When I suppress that urge to suppress myself, uh when I just go ahead and be the asshole up front, you know what, Mariah, I love you, you're irritating the shit out of me, stop that. I want this to go different. uh and then it doesn't build and build and build and build, and then the nice guy just doesn't, out of nowhere, because she thinks it's fine, she thinks there's no problem with all this, oh, whatever it is, just pick something random, I don't know what. uh and this whole time I've acted like it was no big deal, no big deal, and then suddenly out of nowhere it's, nuclear explosion. I am so sick and tired of this shit. And it's like, hold on, whoa, whoa. Where's this coming from? I thought this was fine, and if I say up front, no, I want this tiny small detail this way, and no, there's no good reason for it. It's just the way that I prefer it, and it makes it, to where I'm not going to explode. Well, that's not evil of me, saying that does not make me the monster, although you have to go through being the monster to get to that point, because you have to be willing to say that your will is more important, or your will takes precedent. I had to come to the point where I said, no, my will takes precedence, and that is coming out of that monster area, right? That selfish area where all that matters is you. It's still all that matters is me. What makes it not be monstrous, and what makes it be hard man hero now? Or is it just all monstrous, and I'm kidding myself that I'm the hard man hero?
Yeah, and I think you and I are both kidding ourselves. I think most of us who live in the West kid ourselves. Um, we have no memory of a king. Um, Soren Kierkegaard said that the mass of us um, never actually make a decision. We do what everybody else does, um, and that he reasoned, he wondered whether we didn't have any soul to save because we'd never made any actual decision. We'd never actually either stood up to choose poorly, viciously, actually being the monster, like you say, be the asshole. But what you're talking about being the asshole, I totally understand where you're coming from. You do this, you assert your will just this tiny bit and say, hey, this is what I want. And you frame that in your mind as, oh, I'm a huge asshole because I've said what I want. Um, there's nothing monstrous about that. And Kierkegaard wondered whether any of us would have souls to save because none of us had made any decisions heroic enough, altruistic enough, substantial enough, taking a bullet for the Lord, for example. Likewise, none of us had ever chosen to do anything so damnable, so defiant, so rebellious against the Lord. Now, this isn't scriptural, and I wouldn't put any stock in it, but it's an interesting mental experiment just to say, have I chosen? Have I honestly chosen? Have I defied the mores and customs of our culture? Have I said, this is the way it's going to be? And then, damn the torpedoes and consequences come what may. And in a lot of ways, I would say I'm too cowardly to even be a hero or a monster. I care far too much about what people think.
I'm going to call bullshit on that. You're not still Hajime up on the bridge waiting to get your ass kicked down into the labyrinth. You've at least been to the bottom of the labyrinth.
I think I think that's the thing that's the challenge, is really finding out whether or not we've left. I mean, the hero's journey, again, Jordan Peterson points out um, that we really have to recognize and be honest with ourselves about how wretched we really are. Um, and to be able to realize that unblinking, and then to, not say, I'm going to be a hero, but just try moving in an upward direction, maybe a small thing, making our bed or cleaning up the house or painting the fence that needs it in order to gain a little bit more. I'm not sure. This is the thing I've been wrestling with today, is how much does the Lord honor our will? Like in the Hajime, in the anime Arifureta, um, God is kind of a non-entity in the story. He is, but he isn't. Like he's not. I don't want to give any spoilers. God is a significant character, but not in the way that most people think. He's not involved directly in the lives of characters as he says he is in us. And as Christians, we normally think, well, God's going to help me. God's going to guide me. He's going to complete the good work he started in me. But at the same time, um, in the Arifureta story, I mean, Hajime has to get progressively better from being a weakling and make steps, small steps at first, pitiful steps, just surviving at first until um, he eventually starts, approaching his skill cap, let's say.
Yeah. So I think where you're getting derailed, because remember we went back and what the question was, you know, are am I fooling myself? Am I still the monster, or have I transitioned into the hardman hero? And then you said that you weren't sure you'd even left the bridge yet, that you might still be at nice guy phase. And I'm calling bullshit. And I'm going to come back to our metaphor here. Our metaphor is Arifureta, if I'm pronouncing that right, and Hajime. There wasn't only one labyrinth.
No.
Hajime doesn't come out of the first labyrinth uh, enough of the hero to complete his mission. The whole point of the story now is that he has to go and find all these other labyrinths and go through those labyrinths and then amass the skills and the strengths he needs to complete his mission. So my assertion is that, yeah, no, you have gone to the bottom of the first labyrinth. You've probably come out of that first labyrinth. Maybe you're only at that, I mean, I'm not gonna like blow smoke up your skirt and act like you've arrived, but you've certainly come to the end of that first labyrinth. You've met Yue, you've gotten the girl, and you've gone on to the next labyrinth. You're definitely now on the hero's journey.
Well, I will thank you for that positive assessment. Um, but I think for each of us, don't you think that journey is going to be significantly different?
Sure. Yeah, no, of course. I hope you don't have to go. I don't want any man to have to go through what I went through, even though I did a bunch of it to myself. But one of the things that you've changed my life in a way, and one of the and you, because you called me out on some bullshit, and it was the self-deprecating humor I fall back on all the time to sort of hide behind. And you don't use self-deprecating humor, but sometimes you do use a little bit of false modesty, and I think you just tried to shovel some of that shit down our throats there a second ago. You're not on the bridge. You've at least gotten to the bottom of the labyrinth.
You're much more assertive and much more courageous than I am.
Ty wants me to talk about something else. Ty, what do you want me to talk about, brother? Although I'll tell you, on Ty, I think this is probably the most important topic we can talk about in the West, because we have a bunch of men who are hapless and helpless weaklings who mean well and want to do well and are willing to take risks if they just knew what those risks were. If someone would cast them the vision about what's at the bottom of the labyrinth, then they would jump, and then they would face the monsters, and then they would be on the hero's journey, and our society would be saved. Literally, yeah. Men need mission. Pete just said it. This conversation we're having right now is the whole reason behind the Revolting Man channel. This is everything I was interested in when I started this channel. Now I talk about a bunch of other stuff, the guns and the homestead and all the other stuff. But I talk about all of that stuff because those things feed into this topic. How do we get men from where they are to where they want to be? Because every man wants to be on the hero's journey. No man wants to be sitting on the bridge being protected by women. They all want to be on the hero's journey. That's why video games are so seductive for men, because it's a fake hero's journey, but it's a hero's journey. Some of my younger sons today were just playing Halo. They get to play. They probably play a little more than we should let them play, but they don't have complete access to it. But the Saturdays, our Sabbaths are when they do have a little more access to it. And and it's this adventure. It's just they're fighting aliens and saving the universe and all this stuff. And it's a mission, and it's why the video games appeal to men so much, especially young men. And everything I want to talk about is kicking men off. Everything I want to talk about, I just binged this Arifureta. I watched about 3 or 4 episodes last week, and then I binged the rest of them today to get in preparation for this. And everything I want to do with this channel, that silly cartoon, not that it was silly. I liked it. Oh, you're losing me with the cartoon show. Okay, Ty, I'm sorry, but it's this metaphor, and it's a way for us to engage with these ideas. And that's all I can say. And I'm sorry this isn't speaking to you in this iteration. Check us out again some other time. Maybe we'll be talking about a topic that does resonate with you more.
Let me ask something. Why are video games? Why are they addictive?
Oh, because they, it's a dopamine hit in all of those areas where men want dopamine hits. We want to achieve things. We want to be strong. We want to be competent and powerful and dangerous, and heroes. And all of those things get presented to us in those video games. There's no video game I've ever seen yet where the end of the video game is you're a loser, and no one respects you. It's all you're the hero. You've accomplished something amazing, and you're respected.
But what if there were no objectives in the game?
So I haven't seen that game. Even Minecraft has objectives you can complete. So I've never seen that video game with no objectives.
Don't you think that a lot of guys right now, the bad guys don't have a red triangle above their heads. The next mission isn't delineated in your heads-up display. You don't have access to the resources that you might think you need, and you don't have any access to getting clear marching orders for what the objective even is. Don't you think that constitutes part of the problem that men face?
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And I think you just elucidated that very, very well. Why haven't men run to the edge of the bridge and jumped? And it's because, like you said, they don't have an idea what the mission is. No one has told them that they're even on the mission. And I can't remember where I read this. this was not. I have almost no original ideas, and this one is not either. But wherever it was, I ran into it. This guy was talking about how men will charge hell with a glass of ice water as long as they see the smallest potential path to victory. It could be just like 0.1% of a chance of victory, but as long as men see a path, men are willing to face huge odds and horrific danger. But if there's no path to victory, if there's no way to achieve your goals, then most men aren't interested, and wisely, I would say, actually, in sacrificing for nothing. If there's no way to win, if there's no path to success, then most men aren't willing to play that game. And I'm the same way. And there are things worth dying for, and there are times when you just have to man up and take the bullet. But I think most men in the West look at the task in front of them and they say, what's the path to victory here? There's no way for me to affect any change here, so why would I try? And I think that's what you're talking about. What's that?
I mean, isn't that daily life? Because most of us face, you're selling your time for money. You're literally selling your life 1 hour at a time. For really, what are the odds of victory? What's the final payoff? What's the outcome? Something that looks like security?
Keep talking. I'm going to go grab something real quick.
So anyway, although I don't want to lose Ty, but in Hajime, his only goal is to survive. And in most of the world, outside of the West, one of the main goals of the man and the family is survival, whether that's through subsistence farming or whether that's through hunting and gathering or whether that is like us through a minimal, and in Africa, you may work all day for the cost of 2 beers. So, I think if every man had 50 acres of farmland and that was their job, to survive off of 50 acres of farmland, the objectives would be fairly clear. Success would look fairly clear. Their marching orders would be fairly clear. And I think in a lot of ways, I think guys could be more encouraged by feeling like, yeah, my efforts, my outcomes are attendant on my efforts. If I do these things, then this should be the outcome. If not, then this should be the outcome. Whereas it seems like the fantasy world, part of the thing about a fantasy world is having clear enemies, having a clear mission, having clear ends, and not being awash in a sea of confusion with no clear marching orders and no one even really to listen to.
Yeah. So where does the man get those marching orders?
Is that a rhetorical question?
I wouldn't say rhetorical. I'm interested in your opinion. Look, we both know what our answer is going to be to that question ultimately. I guess I would like to not over spiritualize it, or as soon as we spiritualize something, most men's brains turn off because they assume that means that it doesn't apply to them because they're dirty, rotten, lustful sinners who like naked women, and so that they can't be they can. Most men think that their sin nature keeps them on the bridge, that they can't start off on the hero's journey because they're not worthy to be on the hero's journey. And when we talk about spiritual matters, that kind of pushes most men even farther down that road. Oh yeah, no, I like naked women. Obviously, I can't be on the hero's journey. I'm no good. And so where do we tell men to go for those marching orders for that mission that isn't just saying the Bible, read your Bible, because that's, even if that's the right answer, that most men are going to hear that and their brains are going to go, beep, and they're going to be like C-3PO going into sleep mode. And we've lost them. They're gone.
Well, my dad is probably the way I framed that. My dad never read his scripture while I was watching. We did go to church every Sunday, and he had good questions. Um, he didn't go to Bible study, he didn't go to any of that stuff. He didn't go to the church every time the doors were open. Um, but every morning, like at 7, he would call everybody in the neighborhood, all the old ladies, all the old men, everybody who was a friend to him, was a friend to his parents. His folks were both gone when, by the time he was 20, his parents were both killed. That was after a very ugly experience. Um, he never has given anyone straight answers about what he did, but it seems that he was involved in reconnaissance work in Vietnam. And we never heard any stories of what he did there, but I know that he was at the bottom of the labyrinth. I know he saw and did things that um, are best probably that no one knows. Um, he did not let that experience destroy him. He had some flashbacks when I was young. Um, 4th of July was usually a tough time. Um, but he did his best as a father. If anything, he was probably not hard enough on me. He wanted me to have a childhood that he didn't get to have. So being a dad, um, even though he and I didn't get on and I was kind of a jackass and arrogant and didn't listen to him at all like I should have when he was alive, um, I can say that God intended that he was who he was. Um, he was generous. He was hardworking. He took care of our land. He took care of the animals. And he took care of my mom and still is, even though he's been gone for nearly a decade. Um, and I think his story is like a lot of guys. So I think I hope to do as well. Um, to be a friend, to be a father, and to be faithful. Long
Okay.
answer.
So let's talk to that young man, or even that old man who feels like he's standing on the bridge, that hapless, helpless, well-meaning idiot, who's being protected by women, and he wants to start that hero's journey. How does he do it?
Well, I think he's already listened to you. And though you're kind of a jackass sometimes, you're a good friend. I think you honestly care both about people and about what the Lord intends. Um, and I think just asking the question, um, Jordan Peterson again said something that we asked the question whether or not, and I laughed like every time I heard him say it, to ask whether or not the world needs something that we have to offer. Um, and it's difficult to imagine that that's the case. Um, but I think that's the reason the Lord's put us here, and the reason you're here. I think uh, this channel is admirable. Who you are is admirable. I look forward to seeing what the Lord is doing this year. It's going to be a big year, both in the good things and in the bad things. Um, I think you would have a much better chance of saying what they should do because you know them better.
So thank you for those were very kind words. And I agree. There's battles all around us. Uh, And if you just engage in any of them, you're gonna suddenly find yourself so under fire, so much fire, that you won't have any choice. If you so much as refuse to bend your knee to the evil, hey Keith, that surrounds us, then you're going to be in the labyrinth. You're going to get thrown off that bridge, and you're going to be in the fire. And then all you have to do is survive. Then all you have to do is keep fighting. So I believe very strongly that we only have two inalienable rights. And they have nothing to do with life, liberty, or the pursuit of happiness. That's utter horseshit. I'm sorry, the Anti-Federalists were right. The Constitution was a brilliant document, but it was a bad idea from the get-go. Our only inalienable rights are the right to conscience. No one can take away from you the right to decide what's right or wrong, and the right of resistance. No one can take away from you the right to resist. Even if they chain you to a wall, that's an act of resistance, because they have to dedicate a chain to tying you down. They've got to assign someone to guard you. So those are the only two things that can't be taken away from you. People can take away all of your property. People can take away your life. They can take away your children. They can take away anything from you. The only two things that are inalienable to you, the only two things that cannot be taken from you, is the right to decide what's right and wrong, conscience, and the right to resistance. And if we just exercise those two rights, then we will be in the fight. We will be in the labyrinth. If you decide that you're going to figure out for yourself what's right and wrong, and you will not accept received wisdom from on high, from a pastor, from the government, from some asshole on YouTube, from Pete Rambo, if you refuse to receive wisdom from an elite, and if you insist on exercising your right of conscience, then you will be in the fire. You will be in that fight. And if you exercise your right to resistance, then that is the fight. Like I said, even if the only thing you're able to do is be chained to a wall, they've still got to chain your ass to a wall. You're still in the fight. You're still resisting. There is no act of resistance too small to be of significance. I can't remember where's the book. I got the book right here. This is a book called Total Resistance, by a guy named H. von Dock. And this was actually issued by the Swiss government back in the 60s, when there was still the threat of communist invasion. When everyone thought that the communist hordes were going to come pouring through the Fulda Gap and try to take the rest of Europe. And so the Swiss government published this book and gave it to all their people. And one of the things they talk about is being ungovernable, where just if everyone in the society, say this happened, say the Soviets came through and took over, and it talks about actual big acts of resistance too. But how if just all of the people in society suddenly took every opportunity they could to do whatever tiny little act of resistance they could, they would become ungovernable. And it wouldn't even just be, oh yeah, we're all, in the streets with our rifles. It would just be like, whatever tiny little shit they could all do to gum up the works. Even if you're becoming ungovernable to the point where, like, I don't know, pick something. Like you decide that you're going to, this is just something stupid. You're going to fight every speeding ticket you get. There's these damn these cameras now that you go through a school zone. I got a ticket the other day for doing 35 miles an hour in a school zone because just out of nowhere, suddenly the speed limit drops down to 25 miles an hour. They can't be bothered to put up a speed limit sign but by God, they can put up a camera and charge me $90. Even if your act of resistance is just going to fight every single one of those, even if you know you're not going to win, but by God, you're just going to gum up the court systems and just make someone show up to prosecute that damn ticket. That's being ungovernable. That's an act of resistance. And if you'll just do that little stuff, it doesn't have to all be, the barricades at dawn. It would be great if we could get there. But you know what? The hero's journey is a journey. You don't start at the end. You start as that whining, sniveling, hapless, helpless, well-intentioned, but completely incompetent weakling who's just trying to not be protected by women. And you just start with what's in front of you, and you survive that, and you survive the next thing, and you survive the next thing, and suddenly you come out the other end, and you're the hero. You've been on the hero's journey, and if we could just cast that vision for men, what's the little tiny thing in front of you can do that's resistance? Planting tomatoes in a 5-gallon bucket on your patio is an act of resistance. Yeah, Indiana Constitutional Patriots, Bear, Pastor Joe Fox over at Viking Preparedness turned me on to this book. He probably also turned Bear onto it. So that's probably Bear and I probably got it from the same place. Got the idea from the same place. But it was Pastor Fox who got me to get that book. He might have given me this copy. No, I had to order this copy. So I guess that was a long-winded answer to say, just start fighting something. It doesn't matter what. Fight something. You gotta pick something and say, you know what? Fuck that. I'm just gonna make that thing's life just a little difficult today because it's wrong and it shouldn't be that way. And you know what? For a lot of us, that may be our wives. A lot of us may need to start this hero's journey in our home against our wives, because there is nothing worse and more unhappy. This applies to women and children both. You just compared women to children. If women and children don't have boundaries, they're miserable. And they're constantly trying to find those boundaries and establish them. And then they think they set up a boundary, but then they don't feel secure in that boundary because it's a boundary they set. And they know that's not a secure boundary. That's not a safe, solid boundary. And so they go looking for some boundary, something that tells them they're safe. They just want to know they're walled in. They just want to know they're protected. And the vast majority of men need to start in their own home, putting a wall of protection and security around their wives and children. And that would put you in the hero's journey right away. Because as much as women and children want those walls of protection, they start trying to climb them at first, Hey, Cronin. So that's probably the best way to get started. Okay, how do I provide that protection for my family that they need and they want, but maybe they're unwilling to accept, What do you think?
You get tired of me. You're gonna get tired of me talking about Jordan Peterson.
No, do it.
I just listened to quite a bit from him in the last couple of days in the tractor, and one of the things he said that we can do to aim up is get off our ass and work or work out. I have problems with like going to a gym because that's essentially Victorian punishment, work that doesn't produce anything. So very little better than digging post holes with a post hole digger, or chopping trees with an axe, or anything that is brute and difficult manual labor, or barring that, climbing a rope, push-ups, pegboard. What do you think about physical strength and also discipline for us? Because one of the things Peterson says that I think is true is that there's no such thing as societal change. There's no such thing as systemic change. Um, that does not start that it and is not entirely composed of individuals.
Right.
If you don't have strong men, forget it.
So
If
this is an area where I'm just now sort of, my intellectual side, to whatever extent it's there, is sort of expanding into this area. Was it the Manichaeans who believed that all physical matter was evil or inherently bad, and so that they struggled to be pure spirit or release pure spirit? Was it the Manichaeans, or was that the?
I honestly cannot tell you. That is basically Platonic philosophy, though.
Was,
Plato believed that all matter was bad, and that crossed over into the Catholic Church as well. That's
right.
where a lot of the ideas about sexuality being bad came from. Was from Plato, but it could very easily be that it was Manichaean as well.
I can't.
I'm
Yeah,
not sure.
it was based on Plato. I remember that, and they made this whole little mystery religion out of it. And Augustus was before he got converted. If you accept that he actually converted, he was big into it. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was this rejection of flesh, and that flesh is bad and spirit is good, and that's an evil, destructive belief. I've come to believe that that's probably evil and destructive. Of course, if I really believe that, then I'd remember what the hell the philosophy was called. But we have created bodies. Our Savior inhabited a physical body. Our Creator created a physical world and set it all in motion and put laws and rules to it. And physicality matters. And we're even told, what's bound in heaven is loosed in earth, and what's loosed in heaven is bound in earth. There is a connection between the physical and the spiritual. One of the few things I've ever heard worthwhile come out of the Catholic Church, and I'm not even sure if this is a Catholic doctrine, it's just where I heard it. It is this idea of redemptive suffering, that all suffering has a positive effect on a person, ultimately. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. And I think it applies to our physical bodies too. There is a redemptive, and maybe that's not the right word, but there is some sort of improvement that comes when we afflict our flesh, when our flesh feels pain and privation, but that ultimately will strengthen it. So, like, not this stupid wearing a hair shirt and beating yourself with a whip, because that doesn't work any ultimate fruit in your flesh, But if there's something that hurts your flesh and improves it at the same time, I think that ultimately has a spiritual component to it. Now, obviously, it can go very, very bad, and if that's all you focus on is the flesh, it's destructive. As only focusing on the spirit is also destructive. But I think, if someone went to the gym and worked out, I don't think that in its proper context, if someone's spending 6 hours in the gym trying to hook up with, chicks or something, obviously that's destructive. But if a man is like, my flesh needs some affliction, I'm going to the gym for 45 minutes 3 times a week. Hey, Camino Antigo, I think that has spiritual benefit, or can have spiritual benefit. And I think, look, being obese, being fat, being what's the word? Where people overeat, one of the 7 deadly sins.
Gluttony.
Gluttony is a sin. Indulging your flesh is a sin. So disciplining your flesh is a virtue. So I say yes. I have a physical job. I work around the place, and then I do push-ups every night. I try to do at least one set, and I usually try to do 2 sets of push-ups every night, because I think, like I said, if you're ignoring your flesh, you're ignoring one half of your created being. Your flesh was created. There is a purpose for your flesh, and so you need to take care of it, or at least deal with it, train it, something. You know what I'm trying to say?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, no. If a man is completely out of shape, if he's obese, if he's got the diabetes, the bad, is it type 2 that you?
I don't think there's a kind.
Yeah, right. But there's a kind that you're born with that you have no control over, and then there's a kind that you acquire through your own stupid lifestyle choices. And if you've got the stupid lifestyle diabetes, and you're making stupid jokes about church potluck dinners and all this stuff, well, that's destructive. And your spiritual journey, this is going to sound weird, and I may have to reel this back in, but your spiritual journey, at some point you will find your spiritual journey capped by your physical weakness. But like, not not physical weakness in far as I can bench press 500 pounds. Physical weakness wherein that your flesh is a stumbling block to you, because you're going to overeat, or you're going to be lazy and sit on the couch and refuse to sweat, and at some point you're going to have to discipline that flesh. God's going to require that sacrifice of you. In the Torah community, we have it was a commanded feast, and it's not a feast, it's the opposite of a feast. It's called the Day of Atonement, and there's a command that for 24 hours you afflict your flesh. You're not told exactly how to do that. Traditionally, it's been a total fast, no food, no liquids from sundown to the next sundown. That's what I've done for the last 3 or 4 years, and it is afflicting to your flesh. There's a reason why that's a tradition, because it works. Not all traditions are bad, but there's a commanded element to afflicting your flesh in our faith. And even Christ said that even New Testament believers are going to fast. Maybe there's not a command for a one day, but there's an expectation that at some point, some way, you're going to discipline your body. And I agree. I think that includes, some kind of physical exercise. Because look at all the stuff in the New Testament that's metaphor, sports metaphors. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. He who runs the race runs all. These are metaphors for Olympic sports, literal Olympic sports. When those people heard those metaphors, they're going to think about Greek style sporting events. So even, obviously, it's just implication. I'm not telling you there's a command to go participate in sports, but there was sort of an implication in the New Testament that this is something that would resonate with people. Pete's calling me out. Pete, I'm saying, yeah, tradition can in limited circumstances be helpful. Yeah, I know. I'll hear that again. Limited circumstances. Pete has to put up with my ravings in other forums a lot. And one of the ones he hears all the time is me going off on traditions. I hate traditions. But that's one tradition that I'll deal with, because first off, it's labeled a tradition, and for whatever reason, it's an effective one. But yes, Pete, you got me. I do like at least that one tradition. So are we saying that there's elements to the hero's journey, that there's a physical element? Because obviously we think of the physical element.
Well, you were just talking about what can we do? Like, what's the objective that guys can really, that the guy's wondering, well, what should I do? I think for some guys, probably for me, something I've been thinking through is that my life needs to be more disciplined than it is, because I don't discipline myself a lot. Um, for some guys, that means no more than 8 beers today. For some guys, no more than 4 beers today. No more than 2 beers. Some people may be struggling with alcoholism. Some people it may be video games, maybe some other thing that today my first step up is going to be I'm going to get up and get dressed. Maybe it's a depression thing. Um, I think the Lord meets us in different places and we face different demons. And sometimes the step up isn't a very big one. But I think like the the compliment you gave me in the beginning was probably the highest compliment you could have given me. And you said that I was a man of substance. And I think we all want to be. And I think there are things that basically cut us off at the knees so that we can't stand up. And some of those things are our own unwillingness to stand, our own unwillingness to discipline ourselves. Um, whether we're afraid to be strong, afraid to stand up, afraid of what it costs, or maybe that'll be meaningless. I don't know. I don't really know what I'm saying here. Just yammering.
So, but no, but I think what you're emphasizing is what needs to be emphasized, and we touched on it earlier. The hero's journey does not start at the end. You do not start at the peak of Mount Mora-Doom, wrestling with Gollum over the ring. You start at the prancing pony. I'm mixing my metaphors here. We've moved on from Arifureta to
No, it's good.
but Fellowship of the Ring. You know what I'm talking about. What's the whole
Mhm.
thing called? The J.R.R. Tolkien's thing. When the
Uh,
Hobbit, when Frodo starts on that journey, he doesn't start at the gates of Mordor. He starts by walking out his front door and going to a tavern the next town over. And Jordan Peterson talks about making your bed. You start, and Scripture talks about he who is faithful in little things will be trusted with the big things. We don't start at the end. We start here. Okay, we got to start with something small. We got to start with what's in front of us. Like you said, if you're an alcoholic and you're drinking 12 beers a day, well, by God, cutting out 2 beers a day is a great damn start. And that could take amazing, willpower and whatnot, to make that first little tiny step. I'm not even call it a tiny step. Let's just call it the first step. That last step at the peak of Mount Mora-Doom is no. Am I saying that right? Is it Mora-Doom or Mora? I think it's Mora-Doom.
yeah.
That
Uh,
last step is no bigger or longer of a step than that very first step was. They're the same steps. They're just in different places. And you got to take that first step. It sounds really cliche when I'm saying it, but maybe, I mean, that's where we start, man. Okay, what's your first step on your hero's journey? It's going to be a stupid one because it's going to be just out your front door, and you're going to take hundreds of steps before you can't look back and see your front door again. For a long time, you're going to feel like you're in your front yard. uh, but those are the steps that matter. Each one of those steps has a far bigger ultimate impact. When you've only taken 10 steps, each step is 10% of the total steps you've made. When you're taking that 1,000th step, well, that's just 1,000th of the progress, that you've already made. Those early steps are the most important steps. And so we got to get men to take those first steps. And you know what? Maybe doing a set of push-ups to failure every night is a great place. I think it might be a great place to start. That might be that first step. Do 20, do as many sets of push-ups as it takes to do 20. And then when you can do 20 push-ups all at once, pick a new goal. That's actually how I started. I'm sad to say this. When I started doing push-ups again after a number of years, I couldn't do 20 correct push-ups. I mean, I could fake 20 push-ups. And so I was just doing as many sets as it took me to reach a total of 20. And now I'm working on 30, and I'm at about 27 right now. And once I get to my goal is 50. When I can do 50 push-ups, without stopping, then I'm going to pick a new physical fit, and maybe I'll start going to the gym at that point or something. I don't know. Yeah, those pesky hobbits. I hate hobbits. But yeah, that's the start of the hero's journey, helping men. What's their first step? Don't focus on the gates of Mordor. You'll get there eventually. What's the first step towards the prancing pony?
Well, and that's really the hardest part, don't you think? Because I mean, after you've made 1,000 steps, after you've had significant victories, well, you can say, yeah, but in the beginning, don't you think it feels meaningless and pointless and
Meaningless, yeah.
well, then the failures feel so like I can't even do 3 push-ups, let's say, or I can't even do a setup. Well, that that's a blow to the ego. And I think it's more heroic to continue like who you are way down the line. Well, that's an easy thing. And especially after you've hit that place where like in the Arifureta story, he starts basically building his team. And he has people who are along helping him and encouraging him and admiring him. And in the beginning, it's just him and he's all on his lonesome. Don't you think that it is kind of solitary? And like, isn't the hero really proven in those first steps that seem miserable and small and meaningless?
Yeah. Because that's when you're starting to pick up velocity and make some distance between where you are and where you want to get. Like I said, all sorts of undisciplined men going nowhere can stand around in their front yard, and like I said, those first 100 steps might not even have you out of your front yard. You might look like you're right where you've always been. Pete just asked, practically most men need to start with getting house in order. What are basic steps to establish self as leader head? I've got a passage of scripture I love, and I don't want to necessarily go to the Bible, but this might be a good place to do this. This is Psalms 128. This is the man psalm. This is the psalm every man needs to start his life on. It's a very short one. Blessed is every one that feareth the Lord, that walketh in his ways. For thou shalt eat the labor of thine hands. Happy shalt thou be, and it shall be well with thee. Thy wife shall be as a fruitful vine by the sides of thine house, thy children like olive plants around the table. Behold, that thus shall the man be blessed that feareth the Lord. The Lord shall bless thee out of Zion, and thou shalt see the good of Jerusalem all the days of thy life. Yea, thou shalt see thy children's children, in peace upon Israel. Okay, so we've got a blueprint here for how a man can situate his life. The blessings that God pours out on a man, and it starts with, you shall eat the labor of thine hands. So most of us need to start, maybe not start, but one of the things we need to look at very carefully is our professional lives. Do we have jobs, and is the fruit of those jobs going to profit us? Are we eating the fruit of our labor? I have not always eaten the fruit of my labor. In fact, for years and years and years, over half of everything I earned got taken by child support. However, we were still, I shouldn't say we weren't eating the fruit of my labor. But what I found was, if I focus on my job and going to work and performing my labor, almost everything else around my life starts falling into place. When I'm working, when I'm getting up and leaving when I'm supposed to leave and doing what I'm supposed to do during the hours I'm supposed to do it, yeah, it sucks and it feels like wasted time. And but it's like when I do that, all of my other goals uh, start coming into fruition. That's the foundational thing. Now Pete's got me stacking silver. That's what's in here that I dropped earlier. And that's saving the fruit of my labor. I'm keeping some of that and storing it as wealth. Uh, that that's that's an important step on all this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's where most of us need to start is in our professional lives. Hey, Chuck Norris Gun Club's here. So that's a practical spot. Are you treating your job like it's a calling from God? Because it is. As a man, you are called to labor. When Adam was put in the garden, the perfect garden, God put him in the perfect place. He put him there with a job and with labor. He was tending a garden. He was tending, the Garden of Eden. However you think, was it an orchard? Yeah, was it more like an orchard? Of course. But he was put there with a purpose and things to do. And in fact, God even included him in creation by having him name the animals. Not that Adam had anything to do with the creative part of it, but God even gave him a role in that. So if your job is just something that you hate and that you look at as a punishment, well, that's the wrong attitude. Your job is a blessing. It's the first blessing God gives you. He won't you won't be blessed with a fruitful wife until you've been blessed with fruitful labor. Labor is a blessing. And Paul tells us that too, in as much as we can live peaceful lives working with our hands. That's why Christ spent at least some time as a carpenter. Uh, so that would be a practical place where I start. Finances, what's something else practical? I would say finances. You need to be getting in control of your finances, which will bring you in a lot of conflict with your wives. Many of you, not me. My wife's far better with money than I am. But for many men, trying to get control of their finances and put their house on a sound financial footing is going to then give them ample opportunity to help put parameters around their wives and children. Uh, I've seen
Uh,
just ridiculous amounts of waste in families financially.
I'm gonna read one. Yours was positive, mine's negative. Is that fair? So this is from Ecclesiastes. I think you know the one I'm going to read. I
I
turned my
love this.
heart to
This is
and
my
to
life
search
verse.
and to seek the scheme of things, and to know the wickedness of folly and the foolishness that is madness. And I find something more bitter than death, the woman whose heart is snares and nets, whose hands are fetters. He who pleases God escapes her, but the sinner is taken by her. Behold, this is what I've found, the preacher, while adding one thing to another, to find the scheme of things.
I was not
Uh,
familiar with that passage. That's an interesting passage.
because at the end of Proverbs, there's Proverbs 31, and all throughout Proverbs, especially in the first 9 chapters, it talks about how, blessed is the man who finds a wife, and her value is worth more than rubies. And then Proverbs 31, it talks about this amazing woman of valor, um, and essentially, she is a reward to a good man, and to a bad man, there is exactly the opposite. um, that you can be the sort that you're going to end up with a disaster. I don't want to draw this distinction too much, because I think to a certain degree, um, when my wife and I were married, I think we were both the bad sort. I hadn't yet been thrown off the bridge, and she was a mess. Um, and the Lord being faithful, He's brought us to where we are now. Um, but I would say, again, we want to be men of substance. And if you don't feel strong or wise or competent or any of the other things, or if you look at your life and you say, you know, and you don't feel like you have control over anything, or you don't feel like you're hearing from God, um, maybe the Lord just wants your attention. Maybe He wants you to shut off the TV or YouTube or whatever and listen, sit and actually talk to actually ask, what do you want me to do? If He's your master, um, you know, if He's my master, I should hear from Him every day. If He's my commanding officer and I never ask for new orders, I'm not a very good subordinate. So I think we need to make sure we're not the wrong sort, number one, and maybe just figuring out, well, are there things in my life that need to go? Like, if I say I respect you, Zach, but I interrupt you every time you open your mouth, or I never do what you ask me to do, well, I can't really say I respect you. I have to get that right first before I move on to the positive step. What do you think?
Yes. So, are we talking about the woman, or are we talking about the man's relationship, or it could be both, to God? Because
I would say I'm saying both.
yeah,
As a man, if I know that I am in open disobedience to God at any point, that's got to get fixed before I do anything else. Wouldn't
yeah,
you say?
yeah. But well, now I'll say this because he said it. You know, he'd prefer you be hot or cold rather than lukewarm. So he'd much rather have you be an honest, open rebellion than these lying, sniveling, weak ass, dirty, slithering snakes who fill pews and pretend to be followers of Christ and are actually just the synagogue of Satan. Uh, so yeah, if your choices are direct open rebellion or you know humble submission, obviously you always want humble submission. If you have the third option of being that lukewarm piece of trash in the middle, obviously you'd prefer open rebellion to that, because at least an honest man can come back from rebellion. It's really hard to come back from being a liar, especially when you think you're lying to God. Holy hell. I don't know.
Hmm.
I mean, that's the biggest crock of shit in the world. You're essentially an atheist. If you think you can lie to God, you're just a damn atheist. You don't actually believe He's real, because if you thought He was real, you would never even countenance the idea that you could trick Him. Holy shit. Uh,
Well, and I think maybe a positive side of the negative, like not being an open rebellion to God or open indifference to God, which I think you're right to say that's worse. I think another thing that is good to have is somebody who's going to call you on your bullshit. If you've got um, if you've got a friend who will call you on your bullshit, I think that's one of the best things you can get, because he will tell you, you know, you drink
yeah.
too much, you smoke too much, you're lazy, get off your ass, be serious. You're not. If you have somebody who's an honest friend to you and will tell you the truth that hurts, and then keep you accountable to do it, that's a blessing. And if you don't have one of those guys, then be one of those guys.
That's an excellent point. Here's a practical place to start. Get yourself around men, or at least a man who will be a true friend to you, in that, yeah, he'll call out your bullshit. Not necessarily that he's just got to be an asshole to you all the time, but every once in a while, when you start straying too far one way or the other, he'll at least say something to you. I want to deal with something Camino Antigo here is I don't think this is what he means, but I think that this is what a lot of men hear when they hear this. His comment is, back to what Rambo said, your house first, or else you're just falling on Pharisaic hypocrisy. I have known a shocking number of men who use the condition of their house as an excuse to not start on the hero's journey. They say, "Oh, my house is not in order." I knew one guy. This was an impressive man on a number of levels too, but he had decided that he had a porn addiction, and that porn was such a vile, horrific sin, even though it's nowhere in Scripture, that it precluded him from fulfilling any spiritual function in his home or the church. And he spent his whole life in this fake crusade against his porn addiction. And I am convinced to this day that it was an excuse. He wanted an excuse to say, "Oh, I'm so sinful, I'm so terrible, I can't do the hard stuff. I've got to wait until God heals me of this porn addiction." And that's what he'd say. He's looking for healing or deliverance and all this shit. And so he used, and I've seen a lot of other men do this too, is why I bring it up. He used the condition of his household as an excuse for him to not take leadership in any other area of his life. And yes, you do have to be focused on getting your home squared away, but you can walk and chew gum at the same time. You're not captive to whether or not your wife and your children think you're a good man. You don't have to wait to get approval from home for you to start fulfilling your role in the rest of society. Because you know what? You could be married to just an angry, contentious, difficult, bitchy woman. And that doesn't mean that you don't have a role to fulfill in society or in your community. Sometimes that woman's just going to have to be damn unhappy, and it doesn't reflect on you in the least. Risky Krisky's here. We are in exalted company. Risky Krisky, I enjoyed your last couple of videos. Some of those, what is it, schizophrenic rant? I think you call them schizophrenic rants. Those are pretty entertaining, sir. Risky Krisky is the real deal. All right. Anyway, so I just wanted to mention that, Camino Antigo. Yes, your family has to be your primary focus, but no, your family is not your only focus, and your family can't end up being an excuse for you to do nothing else. You can't just be sitting at home waiting for a woman to be content and happy so that you can then sally forth in the rest of the areas of your life and start that hero's journey.
And can I talk to that too, Zach?
Yeah. I'm going to go get a glass of tea real quick. I'll be right back.
Only tea?
Yeah.
I'll have a scotch while you're going.
Okay.
A digital scotch. In Africa, they have a saying that I am because we are. And I never understood it. They talked about a communal identity in which the members of the tribe, friend in particular who was explaining this to me, talked about how he didn't really have his own identity. All that people needed to know was where he was from, who his parents were, and then all he needed to know was what was required of him. And I know for me, when we're talking about the family, sometimes it's easy to put the family first, the house first. But instead of becoming the head of the family, you put the family's needs, you put the family's wants, you put the family's condition ahead of your own. In line with Scripture, that seems to be the case. That husbands, love your wives and give yourself up for her. so that, by um, washing with the word and with water, she might be presented whole and spotless. Um, and this notion of giving ourselves up, being a servant. Um, but I know for me, um, servant leadership, I lost the leadership part. I stopped being a leader. I became a servant. And it's actually took a long time for me to come to the point where, you know, I will follow my Lord, period. And if there is no one with me, I will follow. Um, you know, I love my wives, my kids. I love, my parents. I love my brother. But if the Lord calls me to a place and they don't like it and they ostracize me or abandon me, then that is enough. I will follow. Um, and remarkably enough, I think that's the step that the Lord expected from me. Um, and it's still something I'm working on to say, this is my singular pursuit. This is what, and now that I know I don't need anyone with me. And if anyone wants to depart from my Lord's orders, they don't need to accompany me any longer. They are with me because they are sharing the direction that I hold to be the true north and the true direction that I have. If they don't want to share that direction, then they won't be traveling with me. So there is a sense where I think that this idea that the family first, that can actually be a kind of idolatry, that our commitment is first and foremost and absolutely to the Lord Himself. Period. No caveats. No anything else. Um, because like in Scripture, the house of David, the house of Jesse, the house of Israel, the house of Abraham. In every case, the metaphor house, or it's telling at the end of the book of Ruth. I was talking to a friend, praying for a friend in this, that Ruth, the people bless her by saying, "Let her build up the house of her husband, Boaz, like Leah and Rachel." In every case, men are the house and women build it. That's the way that metaphor works when it occurs. Men are the house, and the women either build up that house or they tear it down. So I think to be the head of the house, and this is still something I'm working through. So call me on my bullshit if you need to, Zach. But there is this sense that you're it, um, and they need to come to you. You don't need to come to them. What do you think?
Yeah, so I agree 100%. If I start talking about servant leadership, my head might explode. I hate servant leadership with such a passion uh, that it's like a visceral hatred for me. When someone says servant leadership, and lots of men just say it reflexively because they've never even thought to question it. But servant leadership is a lie from the pit of hell, and one of the more heretical lies that gets talked about in the modern. I don't even like the word Christian because it doesn't mean anything anymore. Yeah, indeed. Pete said, David Wilbur, David Wilbur, David Wilbur. If you want to see where servant leadership leads you, go look at David Wilbur, and then you'll see where that
I
that comes
see it
out.
with it.
Don't do it. Don't do it to yourself. Oh, it's it's a cross that Pete has to bear, and I've tried to help him carry it, but it's just awful. Anyway, what you were just talking about, you know, they talk about the nuclear family, uh, and they get that phrase from comparing the family to an atom, and it really is a really apt metaphor, because in an atom you've got this nucleus and you've got all these electrons swirling around that nucleus, and at any point that nucleus can just put its arms out, and that those electrons are going to come past it at some point in that orbit, and you can lay hands on them. But the instant that nucleus starts chasing off after those electrons, well, that's actually a nuclear explosion. You know, that's actually a horrific thing. You know, the nucleus can never chase the electrons. The electrons have to orbit the nucleus. And for that to happen, the nucleus has to be rock solid. You know, the nucleus has to know where it's going, what it's doing, and it has to exert its gravitational influence on those electrons. You know, that's what it's the gravity of the nucleus that grabs those electrons and holds them in orbit. And once the nucleus loses its gravitational pull on those electrons, you know, they shoot off, and that's radiation. That's a nuclear explosion. So yeah, you can never go chasing your wives and children, because it ends up in a meltdown, literal. You've got to be that gravitational force that keeps them. You don't have to have them attached to you, but as long as they're in orbit, as long as your gravity is and keeps them in orbit, well, at any point you can reach out and touch them when they come around. You know, at least twice in their orbit, you'll be able to reach out and touch them. So yeah, you've got to be, as the man, you have got to be the center of your family, whether your family realizes you're the center or not. You know, these people frequently do not appreciate you and cannot appreciate you, and expecting them to appreciate you is a little bit of a fool's errand, because they don't understand. I'm self-aggrandizing here a little bit, obviously, because I'm talking about myself by proxy, but they don't understand what you do, you know, and they don't understand what it costs you to be the bad guy. When, you know, sometimes someone's got, you know, when you're setting those parameters, when you're giving everyone those boundaries to make them feel secure, well, you know what, that they don't like that. And sometimes you've got to be the asshole bad guy to do that. And, you know, and then everyone just thinks, oh, you're so mean, or, oh, you've got such an ego, or, you know, what? And they don't appreciate what it is that you've done for them, in willing to love them enough to have them be mad at you. That's one of the most loving things you can do for someone, is to say, you know what, I love you so much that you can hate me. And I'm willing to absorb that, rather than go the easy route and harm you, yet have you love me and like me. That short of dying for someone, that's one of the most loving acts you can do. You know, go ahead, hate me. This is in your best interest, and I'm going to do it either way. And women and children will, until, you know, unless your children are sons and they grow up to be good fathers themselves, they won't appreciate that until it happens to them. And so expecting them to appreciate you, you know, expecting them to affirm you is just a fool's errand. It's not going to happen, because they can't comprehend it. It's just so far beyond anything women and children can imagine doing, you know, especially women. And it's not a bad thing, it's their nature. But for a woman to say, oh, you know, being mean is loving, is just so far outside of their nature that they can't comprehend it. I don't remember why I was off on that tangent. It was something you said, though, that
just about the man being the center of the house.
Oh yeah. So if you're chasing their approval, you know, if you're doing things for them, here's another way to look at it. If you've ever done any land navigation with a compass, vehicle land navigation is almost completely, not completely, it's very different than foot-based land navigation. And one of the things that makes it so different is that you can't use a compass inside a vehicle, at least not accurately, because all of the metal around it affects the magnetic compass, and it distorts it, and it doesn't give a true north. Well, women and children are surrounded. They're in the vehicle, they're in the comfort, they're in these secure enclosures like vehicles, and their compass is just not accurate. And it's not supposed to be. That's a feature, not a bug. And as a man, you're the one outside the vehicle. You're the one outside the metal walls. Your compass is more accurate. It points true north. And you cannot expect them to see things with the far distance clarity that you do. You're going to see objects farther away, more clear, and with a better sense of direction than the women and children in your lives will.
Something you said brought something up for me, though. You talked about the nuclear family. Willard Harley brought up in his book, His Needs, Her Needs. It's really a fairly good book on the relationship between men and women. But he wrote, like a 20th or 30th anniversary edition. And he said that he didn't realize that he was witnessing the destruction of the nuclear family in North America. And that the nuclear family essentially has dissolved. In Africa, they don't even have a word for a nuclear family. They don't even have a word for family. The word is people of the house. In Scripture, in the Old Testament, there's the house, and then there's the clan. So it's very similar. Is the nuclear family a lie? Because our family still has my grandparents and my great grandparents' land, almost entirety. But for the 3 generations we've been here, we own what they owned. It belongs to my mom now. My brother and I are here. And one day it will belong to my children, God willing. But if you had a clan that was centered on you as a house, and that house and those relationships still respected your authority, how would things look differently in the United States if that was the status quo?
Yeah, it would, if we were still, tribal, it would affect everything.
You would tend to amass wealth through legacy. You would have security through large families and through alliances between large families. Yeah. And it would be much more difficult to govern.
Yeah. I'm going to toot my own horn here a little bit. Because of everyone I know, I'm probably the closest thing to a tribe of any men I know. And I just base that on having 15 children. It makes you a tribe. And obviously a man with 16 children is more of a tribe than I would be, but I'm still a tribe. And I can tell you that I'm 47 years old, and I have 2 sons that are grown. One's 23 and one's about to be 19 or 20. I can't remember. When there's 15 of them mudsuckers, their birthdays start running together. And it is amazing to me how profitable those young men are to me. Just in the sense that, I don't take money from them. They don't support me in any way. But if I have something, I can make a phone call and I can have two men show up and and we can do insane amounts of work in a short amount of time and advance my projects. Like, it's stupid how far I can advance a project when those two show up and give me 2 hours. A few months ago, I hurt my back after an accident, and I couldn't split firewood for about 3 weeks. And my son came over and split my firewood for me.
Yeah, you talk like you have cold down there.
Yeah. Well, I was cold.
Yeah, on a sweatshirt or something. Maybe the flip flops.
Yeah, you're an asshole. Anyway, that my point being, I've gotten a little close to the tribal thing, and it is, in my opinion, the way forward, and the way back to freedom. Tribes are resistant to poverty. They are resistant to tyranny. They are resistant to oppression. Tribes start becoming self-perpetuating. You don't have to work on your culture anymore. Your culture reinforces itself as new members come into it. It's an amazing thing.
What do you think about choosing your kin?
Elaborate here. Like, obviously you choose your wives.
There's a way that is operative in our culture in terms of children disowning their parents, belittling, discrediting, making light of them. And in scripture, that carries a heavy curse. I mean, it's in the 10 Commandments. Could end up in a death penalty by stoning. Not a good thing. So the idea of choosing your kin as a means of disowning your blood kin, not a good thing. And I think, sadly, many of us end up doing that because that's the way our culture is presently wired. But in terms of like the relationship between David and Jonathan, they covenanted together, and essentially, though they were not kin, David did choose Jonathan as kin.
Yeah. So the thing that comes to my mind, Indiana constitutional patriot. I've been blessed. There's no doubt about that. The first thing that comes to my mind when you were talking about that, when you started explaining it, is that if you dislike your parents, if you don't want to be your parents, the quickest way to become your parents is to reject your parents. That will guarantee you become them quicker than anything else, because you cannot escape your legacy. There is a spiritual and a physical legacy that comes through the bloodline. There is no way around it. And even medical science will tell you this. They'll tell you the children of alcoholics are more likely to be alcoholics, even if they're adopted at birth. Drug addicts, all this stuff, homosexuality, it all runs in the family. Same thing with personality traits and character flaws and failings. And if you want to perpetuate those things in your life, then scorn them in your parents' lives. The only way you can't escape your legacy, all you can do is improve it, and the way to do that is to, first off, accept your parents, forgive them for their failings, look at what they did right and look at what you would want to change in your life, and change those things, as much as you can in your life. My father is a very good, courageous, strong, unyielding man. He will never bend from the truth. He's frequently mistaken, but once he decides something's true, he will not bend, no matter what you do to him. He will stand for that truth. There are things in his life that I saw perpetuating in my life that I didn't want, and that he wouldn't have wanted for me. He's also an honest man. He wouldn't act like he's perfect. And when I scorned those things in his life, and when I judged him harshly for it, is when they were most evident in my life. And when I accepted my legacy and embraced my role in the family line, and just said, okay, these are problems that I want to improve on. I'm going to accept my father's legacy, and I'm going to try to learn from his mistakes. Well, then those things got much, much better, and they're not gone. I still have to be very careful about them, but they got so much better. And I believe very firmly, had I persisted in my, I don't want to say rebellion, but that probably is right. Had I persisted in my hard-heartedness towards my father in those areas, those things would have simply become more manifest, and more destructive than they had ever been in his life. So no, I don't, and you kind of said the same thing. No, I don't think you can't choose your family. All you can do is improve on the legacy that you were given. You can't escape it. You can't deny it. You can't, run from it. Your legacy is set. All you can do is shape it and change it within parameters. You can only so much you can change it. And so when you hand it to your sons, it's just a little different, and then they can shape it and change it. And that's the thing, over generations, over years, if we're faithful, yes, then we can change our legacy. But it's not a 90-degree thing. It's a curve. So I think, no, if this whole thing of found family is what they call it these days, right? Or I guess you use the phrase chosen family. I've heard the various homosexual communities refer to found family, where they reject their families for not being accepting enough of their lifestyles, and so then they adopt these friend groups and give them the significance that family would otherwise hold in their lives, and these become their important relationships, allegedly. And there's a reason why that's so prevalent in those communities. It probably accomplishes multiple things in their lives. It cuts them off from any grounding, any sense of community, any sense of responsibility, obligation. Hey, Isaac's here. Hey, Isaac.
Well, I guess my question was more around, you're a Torah observant, you're a Torah keeper.
Yes.
So Deuteronomy 23, when I say it's late teens, early 20s, says you will not loan money at interest to your brother. You may loan money at interest to the stranger, but you will not loan money at interest to your brother.
Right. So how would you define brother?
That's what I'm asking you.
Yeah.
So your brother chosen kin, because not that they have been kin by your choice, but rather by the Lord's. Yeah. Are you putting yourself in the place of the Israelite, so that you could ask me for money, and I would say, yeah, I happen to have money, and I'll give it to you.
So now, correct me if I'm wrong here, and Pete might be able to comment on this too in the comments. Is this not connected to something about the necessities of life if your brother has need? Because so I had a mortgage on my house, and I was able to pay off my house in 7 years. Now, just because it worked out well for me doesn't mean it's okay. If the scripture's against it, no matter how it worked out for me, it's still wrong. However, we got a house cheaper than we could rent it for, and we were able to pay it off in 7 years. And now we've got an asset, and our expenses are reduced because someone lent me money. $20,000 is what we had to borrow. We got so blessed on this place. It was $30,000. We put 10,000 down, and we had to finance 20,000. So I would really want to be careful about, when we talk about interest, interest can be a wonderful thing. It was a wonderful thing for me. And the guy it was a local businessman who financed it here for us in town. And he charged us 7% interest, which was, much higher interest than, banks were charging. But the banks wouldn't finance the place because of the road. And so even at 7% interest, the payment was still like under $300, right at $300 a month. I don't remember exactly. And rent for this place would have been around $700 even at the time. So, interest for me is
there are like old Mennonite families, and it used to be, I don't know, the old Mennonites have kind of decayed, but it used to be that a young couple would get married, and the colony would say, okay, and they would buy their house, or they're usually a farm, and then the couple would pay the money back to the colony in order to marry the next couple. So the colony basically made it so that young couples didn't start out with debt. So I guess my only question is, as a Torah keeper, are other Torah keepers your brothers? And then are they bound by Torah? And I'm not trying to put you down or anybody down.
Yeah, I'll just have to say I don't know. I'm ignorant in this area, and I guess I should. This is something I need to get studied up on, because I don't have a scriptural based answer for you, unfortunately. Pete just said that with family / Israel, not supposed to charge interest. So Pete's far more studied on these matters than I am. I don't know if he fixed the grammar in that statement, if it would change the context.
Well, my question was really more about your extended family, my extended family.
Right.
I would count you as closer than much of my blood kin.
Yeah.
Because we share a great deal more in common than I do with some of my blood kin. There are blood kin that once this life passes, I will never see them again.
Yeah.
We will be infinitely separated. Not that I know that with absolute certainty, but if what I've understood from Scripture holds true, and without the Lord doing something amazing, I will never see them again. But I will see you for a very long time. So we'll have lots of time to get on one another's nerves. But if we are kin, then again, going back to first steps, also going back to the person, the brother who will call your bullshit. Do we have responsibilities?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, certainly.
So what did those look like? And I'm having iced tea.
You're on the tea train too now, huh?
No, so not now, really.
I'm gonna draw a distinction that a lot of Torah keepers bristle at. I don't claim to be Israel, and a lot of Torah keepers do. They either will identify with some lost tribe, or they'll talk about being grafted in. Both of those claims are legitimate. I don't reject them out of hand. I don't feel a peace about claiming any of those things for me. They talk, the law sometimes talks about the circumcised foreigner who can approach the Passover lamb, and that's the category I put myself in. So, and something else a lot of Torah keepers kind of reject when I talk about it is that there are a lot of laws that only apply to Israel, physical, literal, people that have a inheritance in the land. And a lot of the laws that they like to throw in our faces and say, well, you don't keep that law, are laws that actually only apply to physical Israel while physical Israel is inhabiting its inheritance in the land. Because and the law will say that, when you come into your inheritance in the land flowing with milk and honey. Right, those were laws that didn't even apply when they were given yet, because they only apply when you come into your inheritance in the land. Not in your inheritance, law doesn't apply. Things like don't eat the fruit of a tree for the first 5 years. The things about not plowing with a oxen and a donkey, and the mixed seed, and mixing linen and wool. All of these the zeet seats, the little tassels. Technically, all these things only apply in the land to Israel, and some of those things about how Israel is supposed to treat each other inside Israel are the same way. They only apply to physical Israel. Inside, lots of people their heads will explode when they hear me say that. I don't know if I think Pete kind of rolls his eyes at me sometimes when I say some of that stuff too. So for me, I need to know those things because they might apply one day, but some of these things just don't apply. There is an advantage to not being Israel, a very big advantage to not being Israel, physical, literal Israel.
I guess the reason I talk about the interest thing is in the West, we have this idea of a disinterested friendship, that is the very best thing, that you're my friend and I would never ask you for money unless I was absolutely humiliated and in desperate need and I had exhausted all other things. And it would be that if I came to you asking for money, you would probably give me money because of how humiliated. In Africa and among African Christians, your friends are the first ones you ask. Like, your family comes first, of course, but your friends are the absolute, like, they're right with your family, because I mean, by the time, and they need money, and in fact their community, their family, that's their security, that's their bank, that's their health insurance, that's everything. Because like their clan, many of their best friends are in their clan, they're in their larger tribe. And as Christians, I think, if I had an extra $1,000, and I probably don't, and you had a need for an extra $1,000, why wouldn't I give that to you? Especially if we're both on the Lord's team, and especially if the thing that you need the $1,000 for is the Lord's will, whatever that may be. And so if we're playing on the same team, it seems like we are far too atomized. And going back to the nuclear family thing, it seems like maybe that the nuclear family bit, we end up getting separated from basically the larger family to which we belong, both genetically and also spiritually. I don't know. That was the point of the whole discussion.
Whole nuclear family thing.
Yeah.
But the nuclear family is the basis for the tribe and the clan, You don't have a tribe and a clan without the nuclear family. Especially, I want to be careful here. I've seen copious amounts of my own blood. I know it's not special. This is just a commentary on a certain culture. It's not a valuation of that culture. But especially when it comes to Northern European Germanic types, we just don't function well in communal settings. We have to have our farmsteads, our homesteads. We have to have our little enclaves inside the bigger whole. And I'm not saying that doesn't apply to other cultures as well. But it's certainly why communes fail so much in America,
But don't you think that has to do a lot more with the egalitarian nature of how most communes work? And don't you think that the German commune, or the German community, it's not less a community, it's just very hierarchical.
It's very hierarchical, it's very stratified, and it's nuclear, it's cellular. It's one of the things that makes it so resilient. There's a whole comprised of, individuals, and the individuals sustain the whole, and the whole sustains the individual, and it goes both. But those individuals are families. There's there's someone saying good night. If that's Indiana constitutionalist, good night, sir. Thank you for investing so much time with us.
I was kind of feeling it too. I mean, honestly, I think we've been talking for a long time. It's been really good to see you again, though.
Okay, so if you need to bail, we can bail. But
well, I'm just thinking of you and also all the people who've been hanging out with you, because you're an hour later than me.
Yeah. Well, so Mariah is actually Isaac. Isaac, we thought about texting you. Mariah is actually up north right now, visiting family, but she just felt like it would be weird meeting a single man by herself, so she asked me not to. But so I've got the kids for 5 days by myself. They're all in bed. Mariah's not here, so I'm kind of a bachelor this weekend. So I've got all the time in the world, sir. We can talk all night. That was the point of all that.
Okay.
But no, if you're bored and you're ready to go, just let me know.
No, I was thinking more if you're live streaming this, I don't want to kill your audience for that matter.
Well, they come and go as they want. My normal live streams are always at least 3 hours. We almost never go less than 3 hours. There's some guys that'll go 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 hours. There's some truly impressive live streams out there. But anywho,
I can't imagine.
But yeah,
I get in myself after about 10 or 15 minutes. So
I'm always shocked at how long they go before I start running out of steam. And we have stayed almost completely out of the chat. Usually it's the chat that will drive the live stream and keep it going.
Well, what's the chat saying? Because I'm sick of hearing me. What are they talking about?
They're kind of just all over the place. They're responding to some stuff and then going off on their own tangent.
Well, pick out a good one.
Oh yeah, that's right. Pete can't leave. Everyone else can leave. Okay, here we go. Isaac says, I like isolation and privacy and almost never have people over. Anglo-Saxon blooded here as well. Not sure if there's any correlation. He was talking about the commune stuff. Chuck Norris says, the Lord saved me from death and being crippled and being crazy. The Lord is merciful. Isaac says it's better to keep security and business within family and community, not large corporations and banks. That's probably back when we were talking about usury.
Yeah.
Camino's said there's one Torah for the Israel born and the same law for everyone grafted in. Yes, Camino, with some caveats. Not every rule in the Torah, not every law in the Torah applies to every person. And one obvious instance would be laws that only apply to the high priest. Obviously those aren't laws that then apply to everyone else. And there's a number of laws like that have specific application within certain groups. Chuck Norris says money is the least thing. He would give it to you without question. Pete said, yes, some laws are written for the land. They make sense everywhere. And he is, yeah, there's nothing that would prohibit anyone from obeying laws that aren't specifically written to them or that don't specifically apply to them in any given time. Indiana constitutional doesn't discriminate against caffeine. So they're just having some good conversations there in the chat. Oh, Sharon's here. Hey, Sharon. It's good to see you, man. Why doesn't Sharon have a... Hold on a second, Sharon. I thought Sharon was a moderator. Okay. Oh, hey, Isaac, by the way, you got promoted. Hold on a second, Isaac. I'm promoting you. Okay. Isaac, you're now a managing moderator. There's some extra things you can do now, although I don't know that you would any reason for you to, but just in case you can, or just in case you need to, you're now a managing moderator. And Sharon, I thought you had been a moderator for a while. I'm not sure why you weren't. And then Sledge Ryan just showed up. Hey, Ryan, how you doing? All right. So, but yeah, no, I would be very, very loath to disassemble the nuclear family and then expect to have a tribe, you know, and maybe that's because my
I'm not
tribe
saying
is my nuclear family. So maybe I'm
I, would,
personalizing this too much.
I wouldn't say disassemble it. I would say, first of all, it has been disassembled. Like, it's
Yes.
not a matter of choosing. It's already done. Like, we can't even choose genders. Like, are we? I guess there's elective gender now. Like, I, I don't want to go down that path too far, but again, you can't make this stuff up. But with a nuclear family, I mean, they've essentially. It used to be you didn't ask about parents because you never knew who was divorced. In the last 5 years, you can't even ask about siblings because if you ask a kid, who their brothers that used to be a safe bet. You could ask, do you have brothers and sisters? Now you can't even ask that because they don't know really the ones who live with me or the ones who I'm blood. That just brings confusion. And now you can't even ask about gender, like brothers and sisters. Well, what do you? So there's just confusion upon confusion upon confusion and diffusion upon diffusion upon diffusion. So I mean the question of whether the nuclear family is or isn't, I mean in the culture which we inhabit, it's essentially been detonated, but utterly destroyed. The question I was really asking is it actually a thing? Like it's something we put on as a culture. We talk about the nuclear family because for a while that was a thing. Um, in Africa, in Cameroon in Africa, like their clan, the family had named every new child. So the oldest male in that family line would name every new child and would name every new child according to what was happening within the family. The parents didn't name the child.
Hmm.
It's very different from our culture. So there were children who were named Hatred because he felt that hatred was what was happening within the family, or some hardship, or there was some great death, and that was the child's name because that was what affected his house. Um, so I wasn't really talking about right or wrong. I know it's a cultural appropriation that we're attaching as people of European heritage. Um, the Old Testament talks about the clan, the mishpacha, and then it talks about the house, which is normally a house attached to the male, the leader of that house, and then his descendants. That um, I can't remember the name. There was one particular familial house that they abstained from alcohol and other things, and they were blessed. I think it was the house of Makir. Um, but they kept the oath of their forefather and they were praised for it. So I don't want to single you out as a Torah keeper. It is really a larger Christian question. Um, if our relationship to our parents is correct, then we treat them with respect and we honor them in accordance with the law and also with the teaching of the Lord or of Jesus in the New Testament. Um, that sets us basically in opposition um, to the powers that be, to the present culture. And I guess my question was more if we are in continuum, as you pointed out, with our parents, with our mother and father, and we've accepted both their strengths and their failings, and we're doing our best to live up to the battle that they have been fighting, and then also in continuance with our children. Um, physically, genetically, our extended family is the main thing, but then our spiritual brotherhood with fellow Christians, um, that's a bigger thing. So that was only what I was trying to get with the nuclear
Yeah.
versus extended
And
distinction.
and so yeah, and I would say two things, and I guess I misunderstood. It sounds more like you want to put the nuclear family as the first step in a layered societal structure. Yes, my nuclear family is a building block, but my nuclear family is not. It's not like, okay, there's my nuclear family and then there's society. There's this level of, there's, my family and then my father's family and then my grandfather's family, and yeah, and it builds and extends out, and it's not just one, a bunch of single atoms in this entire substance. It's a series of compounds built by individual. So I'm with you there. And then there is something we didn't talk about, wherein that, yet some people have to be cut off. If we're going to be a tribe, and if we're going to be just faithful to our faith, yeah, there are people that have to be cut out and cut off and shunned, and it's all through the Old Testament, and it's also in the New Testament, where it's formalized. There's a process for doing that, and there's people that it has to be done to, so that these family structures are not absolute. They can be, in certain circumstances, they can be, what's the right word? Divided, excised. Uh, in theory, I should have to reject certain family members over certain actions, having gone through a certain process. So in those two areas, you're right. The nuclear family is not sacrosanct. It is not, like I said, absolute. There are things that it is. I don't want to say subservient. What's a better term? Subsumed. They're subsumed. There are things that is subsumed to. The nuclear family is subsumed to the tribe. This tribe is subsumed to the clan. The clan is subsumed to the nation. And then you can be cut out of that family unit. You can be cut out of that clan, that nuclear family, and then the tribe and the clan and so on and so on. So, yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you there. The nuclear family, like I said, is not an idol. It can't be an idol. It has to adhere to the rules and the context that it fits into, and it certainly can't be. It's the first rung, not the entire ladder. That's the other mistake we made back in the 50s and 60s and all that. We made the family the entire ladder, not just a rung on the ladder.
Do you still have to obey your mother?
I stop short of saying you have to obey your parents much at all. The command, I believe, is to honor your parents. There are certainly some things that make it very heavily implied that you will obey them. But I'm not positive there's a direct command to obey, especially, and I think there's a reason for that, because the lines of authority cannot be confused once a man and a woman establish a new home. And I think that's what it means when it says a man will leave his father and mother. I don't think it means physical separation. It means those authority lines are cut, because he's now responsible for this woman. And if he's beholden to his father, that actually means his wife is beholden to his father, and your authority lines get confused. So I'm a little leery of saying that you have to obey your parents, especially as a grown man. I think that verbiage, honor your parents, is chosen very, very carefully and very specifically.
So you're looking at the chat comments. I don't want to screw up the chat because you got a good thing going. What are they saying in the chat?
Sharon agrees with me. Honor is not the same as obey. But Sharon and Les, Les is in the chat too, or was earlier. They're a married couple who we actually tend to agree with quite frequently. Indiana Constitutional Page. I'm going to start calling you ICP in Indiana, because that's just a mouthful to say every time. ICP says you can honor them from a distance sometimes. Even if there's bad blood, you can still be cordial and love them. Yeah, you can treat them like strangers in Walmart, you know? Now, this may be a Southern thing, but if you pass a stranger in Walmart, you can make eye contact and nod and be polite and move on. And it doesn't have to turn into a damn, white trash screaming match in the front yard. They can be strangers in Walmart sometimes. I have family members. I have family that's strangers in Walmart.
Can I give you pushback? And I don't honestly know the answer.
Go ahead.
Well, in the New Testament, it does say children obey.
Does it?
Right? I think Peter says children obey. I'll have to check that out. I could look up the reference later. But I did a study on this. Somewhere in the New Testament does say children obey your parents. Honor in the Hebrew idiom is kaved. It means to make weighty, to make heavy. Ironically, the word for cursing and the word for belittling both come from the word for making light, which is kal. So kalal means to make light, to belittle. So the opposite of honoring your parents is making light of them, belittling them, cursing them. But when do you stop? I mean, I do. I'm really blessed by what you're saying about, the lines of authority, and that especially when you become a man, then you are the head of your house. But I've been going through the Joseph story lately. Joseph is the head, second only to Pharaoh in Egypt, and his brothers and his father have run out of food back in Israel. And Joseph says to his sons, "Go down and get us more food." Judah, who is not the firstborn, but is the secondborn, says to his father, "Unless you send my brother Benjamin with me, I won't go." Did he do right, or has he dishonored his father?
I don't know. I stopped short of saying a grown son has to obey his father in 100% in everything. So I don't know. In this instance, Joseph had told them they had to bring back Benjamin in order to get any more grain, right?
Yeah, in order to see his face.
Yeah. So, and that's what I say. So this is actually, honoring his father wants more grain. His father wants him to get more grain. You could almost say he is obeying by disobeying, by saying, "Look, you told me to get more grain. This is how I can get you more grain." And I think, again, I think there's just some wiggle room built into this for that very reason. Not much wiggle room, but I think there's some wiggle room. Now we need to see what your New Testament verse is. Obviously, that colors a lot.
Let me. I'll try to look that up. Actually, can you monologue for a little bit while I look that up, and also take a little trip?
So I'm a big believer in first principles. That there are principles that have to be in place, and those principles aren't going to get controverted. And so these are almost like cheat codes or cheat codes, and so sometimes when you deal with all this stuff that you can't remember all the details of, you can go back to those first principles and say, well, how would that interact with this first principle? One of my first principles I call the metaphor, and the metaphor is that what we call the marriage relationship between husband and a wife, what we call a husband and a wife, is set up very, very purposely to be a living testament for the relationship between God and Israel, or Christ and the church, or God and the individual believer. And in that metaphor, the husband represents God or represents Christ, and the wife represents Israel and the church or the individual believer. So the way the wife treats the husband is supposed to reflect the way the church is supposed to treat Christ. It's a heavy, 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 and it works the other way. The way the husband treats the wife is supposed to reflect the way God treats the church, or Christ treats the church. And that's why all this stuff was set up this way about marriage and adultery and divorce. It's all set up to accurately reflect that relationship, so that there's always a living testament. If you're doing it right, there's always this living testament to the proper way to treat God. And so a wife's anyway. So why this is relevant is because when I talked about those authority structures, because that husband represents God in that relationship, there can be no controverting that authority structure. He is representing God Almighty. He has to be able to represent that correctly. There is no one in between God and Israel, or Christ and the church. There's no one in between or over the husband, for the wife. In fact, even God himself steps out of the way a little bit when it comes to husbands and wives. It's Numbers 30. Go read it. So for me, for a husband to be commanded to total obedience to his father gives his father direct authority over his wife, because the father could then command the son to command the wife. So for me, a direct command to obedience to a grown son gets in trouble for that first principle of the metaphor between a husband and a wife.
So Ephesians chapter 6, verse 1. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you, and that it may live long in the land. I do not have my Greek version in front of me. If the word for children, which it should be, is paidion, then that may not be age specific. Or it may be, I'm sorry, it may be qualified by age. So it may be a command to a younger audience. You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. I would also want to know, it says, obey your parents in the Lord. And then it quotes what I should know which one of the 10 commandments that is, but I don't. And then it quotes one of the 10 commandments there. So is it, would that in the Lord qualify it at all? And then, touching back to the original command of honor, does that qualify it at all?
I mean, there isn't the way you say obey in Hebrew is Shema l'kol, which would be listen to the voice of. So if you obey the Lord, you listen to the voice of the Lord. Shema l'kol. So there isn't like a single there's not a word like obey. It's not a perfect parallel between the two. Am I being at all clear? Does that make...
I think so. I think what you're saying is you don't have a
like, it's not a one-to-one. It's a...
Yeah. So it's good. Like if I was reading, like say Young's literal translation, it might say, young people, hear your parents in the Lord.
If it was in Hebrew,
Right, but
this is in Greek.
right.
Paul is using the word for obey here in Ephesians. So, I mean, but in Hebrew, we don't have Hebrew doesn't have that word. He There's not a way to say obey. They would say Shema Lakol.
Yeah,
Listen
but
to the.
I accept that the New Testament was written in Greek. You're more educated. Do you believe most of the New Testament was written in Greek?
I
Or do
would
you think it was
say
written
that
in Hebrew?
it's highly unlikely that Paul would have written in Hebrew. Um, there's a possible Gospel of Matthew in Aramaic or Hebrew. I'm actually not sure
Mm-hmm.
on that one. I need to do more research on that. Um, I'm not really a New Testament guy. Like that's not my forte.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I I should be better, but I'm not. Um, uh,
So I will say I think this verse needs more study. It certainly seems very powerful. I would want to see, again, what does it mean when it says children, and what does in the Lord mean?
hmm.
Because those two things would color. Because again, so like this, just say, after a woman gets married, you know, is she still owing total obedience to her father? That's that. If that's true, then that's a policy that needs to definitely be studied out.
Yeah. And it isn't. It's not Paideon. It's Techna, which would be just a general word for child. Um, uh, it's not. I need to do more research there.
So when you say general word for child, you mean general word for offspring, or general word for
A,
young?
a young child, age specific, is what
Oh,
I'm trying to say. I'm not doing the best at being particularly articulate, but um, anyway,
still, I
there
mean,
is
it
there is
requires
some,
study. It,
um,
it
I mean,
requires study. But like
for-
if
I work for our farm, my father's farm, even though my father is no longer on this side of existence, and my mom is my boss, and she's also my mom, and so I am able to ask her every day what she wants me to do, and to be able to take that as the Lord's word every day, that what she wants me to do is what I should do. She doesn't speak to to the life of my own household, unless she's saying that I need to go home and tend to my own household. Um, but it is very much, it's wrapped up in the inheritance of our clan.
Yeah, but it's an economic thing. You could say, all right, mom, I love you, but I'm no longer working for you. I've taken a job in town, and that, I won't even say
You
authority.
don't
That
know the difference, do you? I could take a job in town and still work at the farm.
right, but her influence over you in those matters are are voluntary. You've said, I agree to work for you, and part of working for you is that you have to direct the work. The instant you said, I'm sorry, I'm no longer going to be able to work for you, then that day-to-day control, it goes with the job. It doesn't go with you.
It goes with my responsibility as son and my responsibility to the soil.
Right, but it's not intrinsic to your mother-son relationship. There's other relationships at play here that color that interaction.
Not really. Because before she was paying me, I was working with her without her paying me.
But because if she sold the farm to your brother, let's just say, then all of that control around your labor transfers with the farm. And if she didn't own the farm, or if y'all didn't have a farm,
then I would only be responsible for her care and upkeep.
Right.
Because if I did not care for her, I would be worse than an unbeliever.
So, but the control she exercises over your labor is a legitimate control tied to her position on the farm. And anyone who held that position on that farm would have call on your labor, over control of your labor. Sharon disagrees with me on something I said.
What's Sharon say?
She just says disagree. I'm not sure.
Be more specific, Sharon.
Or she might have been talking to ICP. I'm not sure.
Okay.
And then Isaac says he's confused, but I don't believe that. He's a sharp young man. But you know what I'm saying. There's not a spiritual component of obedience in this, boss employee relationship.
Well, but it's not. She wouldn't be my boss if she wasn't my mom. And if she wasn't my mom, I'd have no cause to obey her. I would have less cause to obey her if she was my boss. Because I could tell my boss, F off. I'm not going to. Forget it. That would be easy to do. Because a boss is nothing to me.
Yeah, but there's no spiritual component to the economic relationship. That's a choice, and it's a legitimate choice. And yes, you owe certain amounts of fidelity inside that economic relationship, but that is a commodity that's swappable.
I'm lost too.
Sharon disagrees with my thinking. She agrees with you that you owe responsibility to your mother. And I'm just not expressing myself well. Yes, he owes responsibility to his mother. But that responsibility doesn't carry with it a spiritual requirement to have her control your labor. Right? That's an economic decision.
Is submission the same as control?
I don't think so, no.
See, one of my great problems is there are 40 years worth of chores at our farm that I have neglected because I've been away for most of those 40 years. And there is too much for me to do on any one day, and I am quite overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
And also, my mother will choose better for me than I will choose for myself. I will work out in the sun at 110 or out in the cold at 20 below. And my mother will say, work inside when it's 20 below, work in the shade when it's 110. She will generally treat me better than I would choose for myself. And so submitting to her is actually in some small part a cowardice. And if it were my father, perhaps it would be a little more harsh. Perhaps he would be willing for me to work when it was a little bit hotter and a little bit colder. But it would be no great sacrifice for me to submit to my father. Submission is a great comfort and a great limit, because if I was my own boss, I'm a harsh master.
So, but let's depersonalize it for a second. My mother is a lawyer. if my mother came to me and said, son, I need a paralegal, you must now work for me as my paralegal, I don't have an obligation to go work for her as her paralegal. But if she came to me and said, son, there's a hole in my roof, I need someone to patch this hole for me, then yes, I have an obligation to make sure that her roof gets repaired. But I don't have an obligation to work for her I could choose to. And then if I chose to work for her as a paralegal in her law firm, and she came in and said, Zach, today I want you to focus on XYZ case, then yes, she would have that power, or whatever you want to call it, influence, to dictate, how my labor got applied.
Why wouldn't you choose to?
Maybe I don't want to be a paralegal.
So
maybe it's not satisfying work, or maybe I'm not good at it, or maybe it doesn't pay as much as something else. I mean, there's a whole host of reasons why I may or may not want to go into that line of work. I don't owe her, my living. I owe her well-being. And if I can, and I can, I can make sure her well-being is provided for without then me going and, working some economic position that she requires of me or asks of me.
But why would she ask anything of you that? See, I think that's part of the caveat of in the Lord. I think the Lord's will is particular. My parents, I got married. We were married when I was 19. When we were 19, my parents weren't thrilled about it, but we were confident that was the Lord's will. That was what He intended, and I believe it was correct. So I did defy my parents, and it is good that I did because it was, in fact, what the Lord intended. So I think it's possible for our parents, to basically require what is not the Lord's will of us, just like you or me as fathers can be wrong, or even as husbands, we could expect what's wrong, what is not the Lord's will, from our wives or children, because of our fallenness or whatever. But I think for the main part, I think you're trustworthy for your kids, and I try to be trustworthy for my kids and my family. And my parents were far more trustworthy than I gave them credit for when I was younger, and it's something that I'm amending in my later years.
Yeah, no, it's a completely legitimate choice. I just don't think it's a spiritually required choice. There's no biblical mandate that says if your parents want you to work in their business, that you're forced to work in their business. Not saying it wouldn't be a good thing. I might enjoy being a paralegal for my mother. If the option arose, that's something I might do. But I wouldn't be required by Scripture to take the job, Or let's say this, I'm off doing my job, and my mom calls me at work and tells me how to trap a raccoon. Well, I love my mother. She's a good woman, very successful in her. Well, she doesn't know how to trap no damn raccoon. I'm not going to obey her, in that economic sense of my labor. She's and not that trapping raccoons is difficult. That's just something bizarre I could think of off the top of my head. There's just no spiritual component at that level. It's simply a practical matter. Yes, your mother knows how to manage her farm well.
I think an objection at your division of practical and spiritual.
So yeah, but maybe in the middle it can be hard to separate physical and spiritual. But at the edges, we can definitely say certain things don't have spiritual compulsion to them, and certain things don't have physical compulsion to them on the other side. There are, yeah, it blurs in the middle, but on the edges, we can look at scripture and say there is no direct command on this issue. We don't have to make one.
Well, I would say obey your parents in Ephesians. Techna is not paideon. It is that's part of it. Honor your parents. It's hard to honor your parents if they ask you to do something and you don't do it. Um,
Well, I disagree with that, but it certainly is. You need to have reasons. You're not going to just ignore your parents willy nilly. My parents have, they would, if they could, they would order me to change my views on marriage, on patriarchy, on a whole host of things that I feel very, very strongly about. They would order me to change those views, and
and hence the caveat: obey your parents in the Lord. There
yeah.
are certain things that you cannot change. Um, you cannot appease your parents because that would be defying the Lord.
So it's not an absolute obedience, you know. And I mean,
I
we
think,
all know of instances where people converted and their parents, were very adamant against it, and gave them demands that they convert back to whatever they had been prior, and no one would try to enforce that level of obedience.
well, and I think with you and me, my parents are both. My father was a believer. My mother is a believer. Um, and I mean that's a great comfort. And I think your parents were good people. Um, there are plenty of people who do not share that blessing. There are plenty of people who come from abusive backgrounds whose parents were, um, we'll just say that they won't have to worry about spending much more time with them after they die.
Yeah.
Um, and how do those people work out the honor your parents when there may not be a lot to honor? What do
Yeah,
you
I
think?
mean, we can talk about maybe a daughter who's been molested by a father. How does she honor him but not participate in that abuse? Or accept it. Uh, it gets weird, not weird. I mean, it gets difficult and at the edges. Uh,
Like, and I would touch that one with a 10-foot pole. Like, I wouldn't be able to speak to it. I don't have any idea um, how
I
she
mean,
would set off.
I could give a few, like general guidelines. First off, you're honoring him very, very much when you help him to stop committing a mortal sin. That's probably the most honoring thing you could do for him is make sure that he does not further jeopardize his soul with this, you know, horrific mortal sin he's committing. Uh, that's at least a starting place to honor him. Hey, dumbass, let's help you not do this anymore.
Hmm.
But anywho, all right, we may have run out of steam. I was watching we're down to 13 viewers. Usually, once it drops below double digits, it's usually when I definitely cut it off. But I think that we are getting close enough to done and close enough to single digit viewers that maybe we should start looking to put a fork in this one. What are our closing thoughts?
Well, I don't know. This was nothing that I was expecting, so it was a lot of fun to talk with you and to kick things around. I hope I didn't bore your viewers too much. Was this? I was kind of blindsided by this, so yeah, no idea.
Oh, look at now. Ty is telling us to stay. Damn it, Ty! After you hurt me like that, put that knife in my heart. No, it was a good stream. It was I'm sorry about the problems we had at the first. Apparently, I just need to pay for a premium membership on this Brave app. But it's supposed to work with up to 4 calls. I'm not sure why it wouldn't let you in.
Well, I think one of the best things about, and something that I feel like the Lord is kind of nudging me. I'm not an alcoholic, I don't struggle with cutting down from 12 to 10 beers, but my background has made me pretty antisocial. I don't really know how to be a friend. That's not something that I've ever been good at because I got burned quite a bit when I was young enough. And I think the group of people that you've got together that tune in to listen to you and you talk with, I think that's awesome. That's something worthy of emulation, and that will be the way I'm attempting to aim up. And that's one reason I try to keep in touch with you as often as I can, because I'm not really good at relationship stuff. I think a lot of us guys aren't. We're kind of trained to distrust people because honestly, it's a lot wiser than trusting people, investing in people. So I think it's awesome that you've got a platform and a group of people, a community that are interested in the things that you're thinking about and the Lord's will for not only family and community, but purpose and hope and the coming kingdom. So, whether that's any thoughts, it's just my gratitude and thank you for making me a part of what you're doing.
No, we appreciate you coming on. Before we do shut this down any farther, Sharon has a comment here, and I'll just read her comment, and I'm gonna add a couple words because I think they just got left out by the autocorrect. But Sharon, if I read this wrong in my editing, forgive me and let me know in the comments. She says, I could have no interaction with a father who molested me or who molested a daughter. I have been abused by a family member. No way I could honor that. Then she says, I was not abused by my father. So what she's saying is that she has experienced abuse from a family member. And if a father had done that to a daughter, there's no way she could ever she could see a way for the daughter to honor that father that molested the daughter. And if I've got that wrong, Sharon, please correct me. And I don't have like words to try to resolve that conundrum. All I'll say is that honor does not necessarily. Honor is a very broad category, and you can definitely honor someone while putting them in prison for the rest of their lives. Honor does not look like only one thing in every circumstances.
And the reason I was careful about that is like our family sadly knows about this as well.
Unfortunately, my family does too.
And I, as a male, I mean, it may be honoring not to kill someone, to commit murder, or to wreak vengeance. That may be honor. As but it's too big of a question for me. I think that has to be between the Lord and the person.
Yeah. I don't have ideas that embrace all that. I can't resolve what happened in my family in that area. So obviously I don't have words for a woman who's experienced it. I just would say honor is a very broad category. And it is it has a lot of leeway for different because remember, that's a situation that actually calls for death. You know,
Yeah.
if a father molests his daughter, he's actually condemned to death in the law. And so obviously there's a way to honor your father while killing him, because that daughter would be required first off to make the accusation, and then she would be required to throw one of the first stones. So obviously you can be an active participant in stoning your father to death and still be in compliance with the command to honor him. I don't know what that looks like. I can't even begin to.
Well, think of like Akon's rebellion after the Battle of Jericho, where Akon took some of the spoil. Is it? Am I remembering correctly? No, it was the Battle of Ai, not the Battle of Jericho,
I thought it was Achan.
where Achan took some of the dedicated things and stole them, and therefore placed Israel under the ban. And Achan was selected by the lot until Moses finally came to Achan and said, "Give glory." Again, it's the word for honor, kaved, to the Lord, and confess what you've done. And Achan said what he'd done and where he'd hit and what he'd stolen. But it's just curious that what Moses said is, "Give glory to the Lord." And then Achan removed the punishment from Israel because he and his entire family was stoned and everything that belonged to them. His family was rooted out, was utterly destroyed, and they removed the evil from the midst of Israel. So it's just curious that you talked about basically fulfilling the law being the way, bringing justice and judgment and ultimately condemnation to the person that deserved it, as being giving glory to God and in a way um, providing for the redemption.
Yeah. Pete is still with us, and we need to take an opportunity again to thank Pete for facilitating this. I completely failed. I was trying to emulate him with my technology, and it didn't work. And he stepped in and allowed us to use his Brave account, and he's essentially broadcasting this for us through his technological marvel. I don't understand how it works. Obviously, I couldn't make it work for me. So, Pete, we're very grateful. Whatever value there was in this conversation, it would not have happened if you hadn't have stepped in and stepped up like that. All right, people, or men, and Sharon, we appreciate the hell out of all of you. Thank you for sticking with us for this long. This is a very important conversation. I felt like Lance really uncovered a gem when he saw into this anime and started digging the truth out of it, and I was very grateful that he shared them with me. Even if anime's not your thing, maybe this isn't the one to start with, but the hero's journey from ineffectual nice guy to hard man hero through monstrosity, I think it is the issue of our time. It is the topic that men need to be obsessed with right now. This needs to be the conversation as men that we're having with each other. How do we move from being the Hajime ineffectual nice guy to being the hard man hero? How do we face the monster, incorporate the monster, ingest the monster, take on the attributes of the monster, and then use them to transform the ineffectual nice guy into the hard man hero? It is the question of our time. If there's going to be a future for our country and our culture, then we have to answer that question. We have to launch men, off the bridge into the depths of the labyrinth, and shoot them out the other side as the hero. and Sharon. I know I always talk about the men, but we appreciate you coming along with us. Thank you very much. All righty, man. And Sharon, we appreciate you. You guys have a good evening, and we will do this again soon. Thanks, guys.
Take it easy.
All right, so the stream is over.